I need you to understand something before I tell you this story. I wasn't always the woman who could make a single phone call and watch an empire crumble. I wasn't always someone who understood that silence could be a weapon, that patience could be vengeance, that love could turn so cold it burned worse than hate. I was soft once. Trusting. The kind of woman who believed that family meant something sacred, that marriage vows were unbreakable promises whispered before God and witnesses. I believed in second chances, in the goodness buried deep in people's hearts, in working through problems instead of walking away. That version of me died on a freezing January afternoon beside a lake in upstate New York, watching my baby sister's body sink beneath ice-crusted water while the people I'd called family for 3 years stood on the shore and laughed. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all began, to the moment I first realized I'd married into a family that would eventually try to destroy everything I loved. And hey, wherever you're watching this from, leave a comment and let me know. Because this story, this nightmare I lived through, it could happen to anyone. It could happen to you. And maybe, just maybe, my story will help you see the warning signs I missed until it was almost too late. My name is Rebecca. Rebecca Marie Thornton. Well, it was Thornton. For 3 years, I was Rebecca Ashford, and I wore that name like a badge of honor, like I'd finally made it into some exclusive club I'd been trying to join my whole life. I met Daniel Ashford when I was 26 years old, working as a junior art director at a marketing firm in Manhattan. He was 32, already a partner at his family's commercial real estate development company, and he had this smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. We met at a charity gala, one of those black tie affairs where the champagne flows like water and everyone's trying to out-network everyone else. I wasn't supposed to be there. My boss had food poisoning, and she'd shoved the tickets into my hand that morning with instructions to be charming and get us some new clients. I'd borrowed a dress from my roommate, a sleek black number that was probably too sophisticated for me at the time, and I'd walked into that ballroom feeling like an imposter. Daniel found me hiding by the dessert table, stress-eating chocolate-covered strawberries. "Those are the best thing here," he'd said, reaching for one himself. "Everything else is just for show." I'd laughed, probably too loud, probably with chocolate on my teeth. But he didn't seem to mind. We talked for 2 hours straight, about everything and nothing. He told me about his work, about the buildings his family had developed all over the tri-state area. I told him about my dreams of opening my own design studio someday, about the tiny apartment I shared with 2 roommates in Queens, about my family. God, I talked so much about my family that night. About my parents, Helen and Robert Thornton, who'd built their printing business from nothing in their garage in Philadelphia. About my younger sister, Emily, who was 19 at the time and studying environmental science at Cornell. Emily, who was brilliant and funny and so full of life that she practically glowed. Emily, who trusted me to protect her because I was her big sister, and big sisters are supposed to keep their little sisters safe. I can still see her face so clearly, those green eyes that matched mine exactly, that wild auburn hair she was always complaining about, that smile that could light up the darkest room. She was 8 years younger than me, an unexpected blessing my parents called her, the surprise baby who'd come along when they'd thought they were done having kids. I practically raised her. When Mom and Dad were working 18-hour days to keep their business afloat, I was the one braiding Emily's hair for school, helping with homework, teaching her to ride a bike, holding her when she cried over her first heartbreak. She was my best friend. My whole heart walking around outside my body. Daniel seemed charmed by my stories about Emily. He said he wished his own family was that close, that loving. He painted a picture of his upbringing that should have been a warning: cold parents, competitive siblings, a childhood where affection was earned through achievement rather than freely given. But I was young and naive, and I thought I could be the warmth that thawed his frozen family. I thought love could fix anything. We dated for 8 months before he proposed. 8 months of romantic dinners and weekend getaways and flowers delivered to my office. 8 months of him slowly introducing me to his family, and me missing every single red flag they waved in my face. His mother, Patricia Ashford, was all plastic smiles and backhanded compliments. "How lovely that you work in marketing, dear. Such a creative field. Not as stable as law or medicine, of course, but creative." His father, Gregory Ashford, barely acknowledged my existence unless Daniel was in the room. His older brother, Justin, and Justin's wife, Veronica, treated me like I was a temporary amusement, someone who'd be replaced by next season's model. And then there was Daniel's younger sister, Natalie, who was 24 and seemed to view me as competition for her brother's attention. She was the baby of the family, spoiled and sharp-tongued, and she had this way of saying things that sounded like jokes but cut like knives. But whenever I expressed concern to Daniel, he'd kiss my forehead and tell me I was overthinking things, that his family just took time to warm up to new people, that they'd love me once they really got to know me. I wanted so badly to believe him. The proposal happened on a beach in the Hamptons, at sunset, with a ring that probably cost more than I'd made in my entire first year of work. I said yes because I loved him, yes, but also because I thought I could build a bridge between my warm, chaotic family and his cold, perfect one. I thought I could be the person who brought everyone together. I called Emily the second we got back to the beach house. She screamed so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear, and then she cried, and then she made me promise I'd let her be my maid of honor. "I'm so happy for you, Becca," she'd said, using the nickname only she called me. "You deserve this. You deserve someone who treats you like a queen." If only I'd known that Daniel's family would eventually treat both of us like nothing more than disposable entertainment. The wedding was beautiful. Exactly what Patricia wanted, which meant it was nothing like what I'd dreamed about since I was a little girl. We got married at the Ashford family estate, a sprawling property in Westchester with manicured gardens and a house that looked like it belonged in a magazine. 300 guests, most of whom I didn't know. A designer dress that Patricia chose. A menu that Patricia approved. Flowers that Patricia selected. I became Mrs. Daniel Ashford on a perfect June day, wearing someone else's vision of a bride, promising forever to a man I thought I knew. Emily stood beside me as my maid of honor, looking radiant in the pale pink dress we'd picked out together. She was 20 years old by then, taking a summer break from Cornell. She was the only part of that whole production that felt real to me, the only reminder that I was still Rebecca from Philly, not this new person being molded into an Ashford wife. During the reception, Emily pulled me aside. We were standing near the garden fountain, away from the crowd, and she had this worried look on her face. "Are you happy, Becca?" she asked quietly. "Like, really happy?" I'd laughed and hugged her. "Of course I'm happy. I just married the man of my dreams." She didn't look convinced. "His family is kind of intense." "They're just getting used to me," I'd said, repeating Daniel's words like a mantra. "Give them time." Emily bit her lip, like she wanted to say more, but then Daniel's aunt called for more photos, and the moment passed. I wish I'd listened to her instincts. I wish I'd trusted that uneasy feeling in my gut that I kept pushing down, kept dismissing as wedding day jitters or adjustment period anxiety. But I didn't. I dove headfirst into being an Ashford, into proving myself worthy of the family I'd married into. The first year was manageable. Daniel and I lived in a loft in Tribeca, far enough from his family that I could maintain some independence. We had our own life, our own routines. He went to work early and came home late, but when he was home, he was present. We cooked dinner together, watched movies, made plans for the future. But the family dinners. God, those family dinners. Every Sunday, mandatory attendance at the Westchester estate. Patricia would cook, well, supervise the cooking, and we'd all gather around that enormous dining room table while Gregory held court about business and politics and everything he deemed important. I learned to smile and nod, to compliment the food, to never disagree with anything anyone said. I learned to make myself smaller. Emily visited us in the city whenever she could, usually spending weekends at our place when she needed a break from school. Daniel's family met her a few times during those first-year gatherings. They were polite. The kind of polite that's really just ice-cold civility. Patricia commented on how energetic Emily was, which was clearly code for something less flattering. Natalie mostly ignored her. Justin and Veronica barely registered her existence. But Emily didn't care. She wasn't trying to impress them. She'd come to see me, her sister, and to escape the pressure of school for a few days. We'd order takeout and binge-watch terrible reality TV and talk about everything like we always had. Those weekends were my lifeline, the only time I felt like myself instead of the Rebecca-shaped doll I was becoming at Ashford family events. By year 2, things started shifting. Daniel got more involved in his family's business, which meant more time with his father and brother, more late nights, more stress. He started drinking more at those Sunday dinners, started agreeing with his family's increasingly pointed comments about my career, my clothes, my opinions. The marketing firm I worked for got bought out by a larger company, and I lost my job in the reorganization. I should have started looking for new work immediately, but Patricia suggested, in that way that wasn't really a suggestion, that maybe I should take some time off, focus on supporting Daniel, maybe think about starting a family. I wasn't ready for kids. I was 28 years old, barely established in my career, still trying to figure out who I was. But the pressure was constant. Every Sunday dinner included questions about when we were going to give them grandchildren, comments about my biological clock, stories about how Patricia had already had 2 children by my age. Daniel didn't defend me. He just refilled his wine glass and changed the subject. I should have left then. I should have seen that he was choosing them over me, over us, over the future we'd talked about building together. But I'd been raised to believe that marriage was work, that you didn't give up just because things got hard, that love meant fighting for your relationship even when every instinct told you to run. So I stayed. I stayed and tried harder to fit into the Ashford mold. I attended charity luncheons with Patricia and Veronica. I took cooking classes to learn how to make the dishes Gregory liked. I let Patricia's hairdresser cut my hair shorter, dye it darker, style it more conservatively. I bought clothes from the designers Patricia approved of. I became quieter at those Sunday dinners, more agreeable, more invisible. I became someone I didn't recognize. Emily noticed. Of course she noticed. She knew me better than anyone. "You're different," she said during one of her visits, about 6 months before everything fell apart. "You're like, dimmed." We were in my kitchen, and I was making something elaborate that Patricia had taught me, something that required precise measurements and perfect timing. The kind of dish designed to impress rather than nourish. "I'm just tired," I'd said, not looking at her. "Work's been exhausting." "You don't work anymore, Becca." The words hit me like a slap. She was right. I'd stopped looking for jobs. I'd started planning my days around Daniel's schedule, around his family's expectations, around being the perfect Ashford wife instead of being Rebecca Thornton who had dreams and ambitions and a voice of her own. "I'm taking a break," I'd said defensively. "Daniel makes enough for both of us." Emily had grabbed my hands, forcing me to stop chopping vegetables and look at her. Those green eyes, so like mine, but brighter somehow, not yet dulled by compromise and capitulation, were filled with concern. "I miss my sister," she'd said softly. "The one who used to tell me I could be anything I wanted. The one who said we should never make ourselves smaller for anyone." I'd wanted to cry. I'd wanted to admit that she was right, that I was lost, that I didn't know how to find my way back to the woman I used to be. But Daniel had walked in then, and I'd pulled away from Emily, plastered on a smile, asked him about his day. The moment passed. Another opportunity wasted. Year 3 was when things got truly dark. The Ashford family business was expanding rapidly, acquiring smaller companies, taking on massive projects. There was more money, more pressure, more stress. And with stress came meanness. They started treating me less like family and more like staff. Patricia would call with demands disguised as requests, plan this party, organize this event, pick up her dry cleaning because her usual place was closed. Natalie would show up at our apartment unannounced, expecting me to drop everything and entertain her. Justin and Veronica started making jokes at my expense during Sunday dinners, laughing about how I'd married up, how lucky I was that Daniel had saved me from my mediocre life. And Daniel laughed along with them. That's when I knew I'd made a terrible mistake. Not in marrying him, necessarily, but in losing myself trying to become what his family wanted. I'd given up everything, my career, my independence, my sense of self, and it still wasn't enough. It would never be enough. I started thinking about leaving. Started imagining what it would be like to file for divorce, to go back to Philadelphia, to start over. Started wondering if I had the courage to admit that I'd failed, that this beautiful life I'd tried to build was really just a beautiful prison. But then Patricia suggested the winter holiday at their lake house. And everything went straight to hell. The invitation came in November, 3 months before my entire world would shatter into pieces so small I still haven't found them all. Patricia called me on a Tuesday afternoon. I remember because Tuesday was the day I'd started reserving for myself. One day a week where I didn't answer to anyone, where I could pretend I was still the old Rebecca who had agency and purpose. I was at a coffee shop in the East Village, working on my laptop, trying to resurrect the portfolio I'd abandoned when I'd stopped looking for work. I saw her name on my phone and almost didn't answer. Almost. "Rebecca, dear," she'd said in that honeyed voice that always meant she wanted something. "I'm calling with wonderful news. Gregory and I have decided to host a winter retreat at the lake house in January. Just family. A chance for all of us to reconnect and spend quality time together away from the chaos of the city." The lake house. I'd heard about it but never been there. It was the Ashford family's private estate in the Adirondacks, some sprawling compound on the shore of a pristine mountain lake. A place where they'd spent summers and winter breaks for generations, where the family's wealth and legacy felt most concentrated, most undeniable. "That sounds lovely," I'd said automatically, my voice doing that pleasant, agreeable thing it always did when I talked to Patricia. "When in January?" "The second week. Friday through Monday. It'll be perfect. The lake freezes beautifully that time of year, and we can do ice skating, snowshoeing, all sorts of winter activities." She paused, and I could hear the calculation in her silence. "Do bring your sister if she's available. I know you two are close, and it's important to us that you feel comfortable bringing your family into ours." That should have been my first warning. Patricia had never expressed any interest in my family before. In 3 years of marriage, she'd met my parents exactly twice, once at the wedding, once at a stiff and awkward dinner in the city that everyone had been relieved to see end. She'd never once suggested including them in Ashford family events. But Emily? Suddenly Emily was welcome? I should have questioned it. Should have wondered why Patricia was suddenly so eager to include my younger sister in a family gathering. Should have listened to that voice in my head screaming that something was wrong. Instead, I felt grateful. Pathetically, desperately grateful that maybe, finally, I was being accepted. That maybe this retreat would be the turning point, the moment when I stopped being an outsider and started being a real Ashford. "Emily would love that," I'd said, my voice warmer now, more genuine. "She's actually on winter break from Cornell right around that time. I'll ask her." "Perfect," Patricia had purred. "I'll have my assistant send you all the details. We're so looking forward to it, Rebecca. This is going to be a very special family trip." When I hung up, I remember feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Stupid, fragile, dangerous hope. I called Emily immediately. "Pack your warmest clothes," I'd said when she answered, not even bothering with hello. "We're going to the Adirondacks in January. Patricia actually invited you specifically. Can you believe it?" There was a pause on the other end. Emily had always been better at reading situations than I was, better at trusting her instincts. "Why?" she'd asked simply. "What do you mean, why?" "Because they want to get to know you better. Because they're finally accepting me as part of the family, and that means accepting the people I love." Another pause. Longer this time. "Becca," she said carefully, "they've had 3 years to get to know me. Why now?" I bristled at the question, defensive in that way you get when someone voices the doubt you're desperately trying to ignore. "Maybe they're finally ready," I'd said. "Maybe they've realized I'm not going anywhere, so they might as well make an effort. Or maybe," I'd softened my voice, trying to pull her in, "maybe I've finally proven myself worthy of being included in their sacred family traditions." I'd meant it as a joke, but it came out bitter. Emily caught the edge in my voice. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone," she'd said firmly. You know that, right? I know. I'd lied. So, are you coming or not? She'd sighed, and I could picture her in her dorm room at Cornell, probably sprawled across her bed with textbooks spread everywhere, her hair pulled up in that messy bun she always wore when studying. Of course I'm coming, she'd said finally. Someone needs to watch your back. At the time, I'd laughed. It seemed like such a dramatic thing to say about a family ski trip. Watch my back. Like we were going into battle instead of a winter retreat. If only I'd understood how right she was. The weeks leading up to the trip were strange. Daniel seemed more distant than usual, more preoccupied. He spent long hours at the office, came home smelling like expensive scotch and his father's cigar smoke, barely spoke during dinner. When I asked him if he was okay, if everything was all right with work, he'd give me a tight smile and say everything was fine. That word. Fine. The most dishonest word in the English language. But I convinced myself I was imagining things, that the stress of the holidays and work deadlines was getting to him. I threw myself into preparing for the lake house trip, shopping for appropriate winter gear, researching the area, trying to plan activities that might bring everyone together. I bought Emily a new winter coat, a beautiful deep green parka that matched her eyes. I bought myself matching thermal underwear and wool socks, determined to look put together even while bundling against the cold. I went through my closet, trying to select clothes that would please Patricia, outfits that said successful Ashford wife instead of girl from Philadelphia who never quite fit in. Looking back, I was dressing for my own funeral and didn't even know it. Emily arrived at our apartment the night before we were supposed to leave for the lake house. Daniel was working late, or said he was, so it was just the two of us, like old times. We ordered Thai food and sprawled on the couch, and for a few hours, I forgot about the Ashfords and their expectations and the person I'd been pretending to be. I'm nervous, Emily admitted, twirling pad thai around her fork. About this trip. Why? She gave me a look. Becca. Come on. His family barely tolerates you. I'm pretty sure they actively dislike me. Why would they suddenly want us at their precious family lake house? People change, I'd said, not believing it even as the words left my mouth. Maybe they've decided to make more of an effort. Or maybe, Emily said quietly, they have some other reason for wanting us there. Some reason that has nothing to do with making you feel included. I'd gotten defensive again. Told her she was being paranoid, that she was projecting her own anxieties onto a situation she didn't fully understand. We'd argued a little, then apologized, then changed the subject. But the tension lingered between us, thick and uncomfortable. That night, lying in bed next to Daniel's empty side, he texted that he was staying at his parents' place because it was too late to drive back to the city. I stared at the ceiling and let myself acknowledge what I'd been avoiding for months. I didn't trust the Ashfords. Any of them. I didn't trust Patricia with her fake smiles and her pointed comments. Didn't trust Gregory with his cold indifference and his casual cruelty. Didn't trust Justin and Veronica with their constant jokes at my expense. Didn't trust Natalie with her barely concealed contempt. And I was starting to not trust Daniel, the man I'd married, the man who'd promised to love and protect me, the man who'd slowly transformed from my champion into their ally. But even then, even with all those doubts swirling through my mind, I never imagined what they were capable of. I never imagined that people who claimed to be civilized, who wore designer clothes and donated to charity and went to church on Christmas, could be capable of such calculated cruelty. I never imagined they'd try to kill my sister. We left for the lake house the next morning. Daniel picked Emily and me up in his Range Rover, the back loaded with our luggage and enough supplies to survive a small apocalypse. The drive from Manhattan to the Adirondacks took nearly 5 hours, and for most of it, Daniel was on the phone with his brother or his father, discussing business in that clipped, efficient way that meant I wasn't supposed to listen or care or have opinions. Emily sat in the back, headphones on, staring out the window at the landscape changing from city to suburbs to rural mountains. I watched her reflection in the side mirror and saw the wariness in her expression, the way she kept her jaw tight, like she was bracing for impact. Smart girl. She was always the smart one. The lake house, calling it a house was like calling the Taj Mahal a building, came into view just as the sun was setting. It was massive, a sprawling log and stone structure that managed to look both rustic and extravagant. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the frozen lake, which stretched out like a sheet of polished marble beneath the darkening sky. Smoke curled from 3 different chimneys. Light spilled from every window, warm and golden and inviting. It looked like something from a dream. A beautiful, perfect dream. Patricia met us at the door, her arms open wide, her smile bright and brittle. "Welcome," she cried, pulling me into a hug that felt like being embraced by a mannequin. "We're so glad you're here. And Emily. Look at you, all grown up now. Come in, get warm. Dinner's almost ready." The rest of the family was already there. Justin and Veronica, looking like they'd stepped out of a LL Bean catalog in their matching cashmere sweaters. Natalie, scrolling through her phone on an oversized couch, barely looking up when we entered. Gregory, standing by the fireplace with a scotch in his hand, nodding at Daniel but not acknowledging Emily or me at all. This was a mistake, I thought. We shouldn't have come. But it was too late. We were there, in their territory, playing by their rules. The trap had been set, and we'd walked right into it. That first night was fine. That word again. Everyone was on their best behavior, polite and pleasant and carefully neutral. We ate dinner around a table that could have seated 20, making small talk about the drive, the weather, the beauty of the property. Patricia had outdone herself with the meal: roasted duck, root vegetables, homemade bread, a chocolate torte for dessert. Emily sat next to me, barely eating, her eyes moving from face to face like she was studying each person, memorizing their expressions, looking for signs of whatever danger her instincts kept screaming about. After dinner, we scattered to our rooms. Daniel and I were in the master suite on the 2nd floor, a cavernous space with a 4-poster bed and a fireplace and a view of the lake that would have been romantic if my husband had been speaking to me. He barely said 10 words before claiming exhaustion and falling asleep, or pretending to. I lay awake for hours, listening to the wind howl across the frozen lake, watching shadows dance on the ceiling, feeling like I was perched on the edge of something terrible and inevitable. Emily's room was down the hall from ours. Before I finally fell asleep, I got up and knocked softly on her door. She opened it immediately, like she'd been waiting for me, and we stood there in the hallway, both of us in our pajamas, both of us scared and not quite sure why. "If anything feels wrong," I whispered. "If anything happens that makes you uncomfortable, we leave." "Okay. We pack up and we leave." She'd nodded, then hugged me tight. "Love you, Becca," she'd said into my shoulder. "Love you too, Em." If I'd known it would be one of the last normal conversations we'd ever have, I would have held her longer. I would have told her how proud I was of her, how grateful I was to be her sister, how she was the best thing in my life and always had been. But I didn't know. I thought we had all the time in the world. The next morning, Saturday, dawned clear and cold. The sun turned the frozen lake into a mirror, blinding and beautiful. Over breakfast, an elaborate spread that Patricia had clearly been preparing since dawn, she announced the day's activities. "We thought it would be fun to do some ice skating after lunch," she said brightly. "The lake's been frozen solid for weeks, perfectly safe. And then maybe some sledding on the North Hill. Winter activities, family bonding, all that good stuff." She'd looked directly at Emily when she said it, that smile still fixed in place, and something in her eyes made my stomach drop. But Emily, brave and trusting and assuming the best in people the way I'd taught her to, just smiled back and said it sounded like fun. I wish I'd grabbed her hand right then. I wish I'd dragged her to the car, driven away from that place, never looked back. I wish I'd trusted my instincts instead of my desperate need to believe that everything would be okay. But I didn't. And by the next afternoon, my sister would be underwater, her blood staining the ice, and I'd be making a phone call that would change everything. If you're still watching, drop a comment below. I need to know I'm not alone in this. And before we continue, if you've ever felt betrayed by the people who were supposed to love you, you understand what I'm about to tell you. Hit that subscribe button, because this story gets darker before it gets better, and you'll want to know how it ends. Check the description box for more stories like this, stories of survival, of revenge, of becoming the person you needed to be all along. Saturday afternoon bled into evening without incident, and I started to relax. Started to think that maybe Emily had been wrong, that maybe this really was just a family retreat, that maybe I'd been paranoid for nothing. We spent the afternoon doing exactly what Patricia had suggested: ice skating on the lake, sledding down the gentle slope behind the house, building a snowman that Natalie immediately knocked over while laughing. The kind of wholesome winter activities you'd see in a holiday movie, everyone bundled in expensive winter gear, breath clouding in the cold air, laughter echoing across the frozen landscape. Emily was having fun. I could tell by the way her cheeks flushed pink, the way she laughed when she stumbled on the ice, the way she looked more relaxed than she had since we'd arrived. She was 21 years old, still young enough to find joy in simple things, still innocent enough to believe that families who smiled at you probably meant well. God, she was so young. I watched her from the edge of the lake, my ice skates dangling from my hand, and felt a surge of protectiveness so fierce it almost knocked me over. This was my baby sister. The kid I'd raised, the person I loved most in the world, the one pure and good thing in my increasingly complicated life. I would die before I let anything happen to her. That night's dinner was louder, more relaxed. Wine flowed freely. Stories were shared. Justin told some elaborate tale about a business deal gone wrong that had everyone laughing. Veronica complimented Emily's skating, said she was a natural. Even Gregory seemed to thaw slightly, actually addressing Emily directly to ask about her studies at Cornell. Daniel sat next to me, his hand resting on my thigh under the table, and for the first time in months, I felt like maybe we were okay. Like maybe we'd survive whatever rough patch we'd been going through. Like maybe this trip really was the fresh start I'd been hoping for. After dinner, we played board games. Monopoly, of all things. Emily and I teamed up against Daniel and Natalie, and we actually won, which made Natalie pout and complain about the rules in that way she had of making jokes that weren't really jokes. But it felt normal. It felt like what families are supposed to feel like. I should have known better. Normal doesn't exist in places like that, with people like them. Normal is just the mask they wear before they show you who they really are. Sunday started the same way. Breakfast, more winter activities, another planned afternoon of family bonding. But there was something different in the air, a tension I couldn't quite name, a current running beneath everyone's pleasant words and careful smiles. Patricia announced at lunch that we'd be doing something special that afternoon. She'd set up a sort of obstacle course on the frozen lake. Nothing dangerous, she assured us, just some fun winter challenges. Racing from point to point, crawling under barriers, that sort of thing. A family competition. It'll be entertaining, she'd said, her eyes bright with something that looked like excitement but felt like malice. The Ashfords are very competitive, after all. It'll be good to see what kind of spirit Emily has. That should have been red flag number 2. Why would they care about testing my 21-year-old sister's spirit? Why did everything suddenly feel like some kind of evaluation, some test we hadn't studied for? But everyone was smiling and nodding, and Emily looked game, and Daniel squeezed my hand under the table like everything was fine, and I talked myself into believing that I was just being paranoid again. We bundled up in our warmest clothes and headed down to the lake around 2 in the afternoon. The sun was high and bright, glinting off the ice, making everything look pristine and safe. Patricia had indeed set up various obstacles, bright orange cones marking a path, a series of small barriers made from wood and rope, even a little flagged checkpoint near the middle of the lake. It looked harmless. Fun. Even. Justin and Veronica went first, racing through the course while the rest of us cheered them on. Then Daniel and Natalie. Then Patricia and Gregory, which was bizarre to watch because they moved through the obstacles with military precision, like they'd done this exact thing before, like they'd practiced. That was red flag number 3. But I still didn't see it. Still didn't understand what was happening. Your turn, Emily, Patricia had called out, her voice carrying across the ice. Let's see what you've got. Emily had grinned at me, that fearless smile that had gotten her into and out of trouble her whole life, and headed onto the ice. Go with her, Rebecca, Patricia had said, almost as an afterthought. Sisters should do these things together, don't you think? So I followed Emily onto the lake, my boots crunching on the frozen surface, the wind biting at my exposed skin. We started the course together, laughing as we ducked under the barriers, racing toward the cones, making jokes about how competitive the Ashfords were and how we were going to show them how it was done. We were about halfway through, maybe 30 yards from shore, when Natalie's voice cut through the air. "Wait, what's that over there?" she called out, pointing toward the far side of the lake. "Is that a deer?" We all turned to look. There was nothing there. Of course there was nothing there. When I turned back around, Justin and Daniel were walking onto the ice toward us, their expressions strange, too focused, too determined. Behind them, Veronica and Natalie were heading out as well, spreading out like they were surrounding us. "What's going on?" I'd asked, my voice sharp with sudden fear. "Just making the game more interesting," Justin had said, and his smile was all wrong, all teeth and no warmth. They converged on us in seconds. All four of them, Justin, Daniel, Natalie, and Veronica, moving with coordinated precision. Emily grabbed my arm, and I could feel her trembling, or maybe that was me. "Daniel," I said, looking at my husband, searching his face for some sign that this was still a game, still something innocent. "What's happening?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. That's when I knew. In that moment of his avoidance, I understood that whatever was about to happen, he'd known about it. He'd agreed to it. He was part of it. "We thought Emily might enjoy a real Ashford family tradition," Natalie said, her voice sing-song and cruel. "A little initiation, if you will." "What are you talking about?" Emily's voice was high and frightened, her grip on my arm tightening. "It's just a game," Veronica said, but her eyes were cold. "We do it with everyone who joins the family. Push them into the water, see how they handle it. It's fun. Character building." My blood turned to ice colder than the lake beneath our feet. "She's not joining your family," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "She's visiting. And you're not pushing anyone anywhere." "Oh, Rebecca," Patricia called from the shore, her voice carried by the wind. "Don't be so dramatic. It's tradition. We did it to Daniel when he was young. To Justin. To Natalie. Everyone survives. It's just a bit of cold water and good fun." "The lake is frozen," I said, stating the obvious, my mind racing to understand what they were suggesting. "She can't. There's no water, there's only ice." "There's water underneath," Justin said, stepping closer. "Near the middle, the ice is thinner. We checked. It'll break easily with the right pressure." I couldn't process what I was hearing. These people, these educated, wealthy, supposedly civilized people, were planning to break through the ice and push my sister into freezing water as some kind of twisted initiation game? "You're insane," I breathed. "You're all insane. We're leaving." I grabbed Emily's hand and tried to turn back toward shore, but they positioned themselves around us, blocking us in, herding us like animals toward the center of the lake where the ice would be thinnest. "Come on, Rebecca," Daniel said, and his voice was gentle, almost pleading. "It's really not a big deal. It's just for a minute. We'll pull her right back out. It's tradition." "Tradition?" I screamed at him. "Your tradition is attempted murder." "Now you're being hysterical," Natalie said, rolling her eyes. "It's not murder. It's barely even a prank. Though I have to say, watching you panic is almost as fun as the main event." They started moving in closer. Emily and I backed up, our feet slipping on the ice, heading exactly where they wanted us to go, toward the center, toward danger, toward whatever nightmarish plan they'd concocted. "Stop," I said, holding up my hand. "Just stop. Whatever this is, whatever you think you're doing, it ends now. We're walking back to shore, we're getting our things, and we're leaving." "You really think you're in a position to make demands?" Justin asked, and there was genuine curiosity in his voice, like he was fascinated by my audacity. "You're on a frozen lake, surrounded, miles from anywhere. Who's going to stop us from doing exactly what we want?" That's when I understood. This wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't some game that got out of hand. They'd planned this. They'd invited Emily specifically for this purpose. They'd lured us here, isolated us, and now they were going to hurt her because… why? Because they could. Because they were cruel. Because some dark part of them enjoyed inflicting pain on people they considered beneath them. Because I'd never really been family to them, and neither had Emily. We were just toys. Entertainment. Objects to be played with and discarded. Becca, Emily whispered beside me, her voice shaking. I'm scared. I know, baby, I said, trying to keep my voice calm even though my heart was hammering against my ribs. I know. But I'm not going to let them hurt you. I promise. It was a promise I couldn't keep. They rushed us then, all at once. Justin grabbed me, his hands like vices on my arms, yanking me away from Emily. I screamed and fought, but he was stronger, and Veronica was there too, both of them dragging me backward while I kicked and clawed and screamed. Daniel and Natalie grabbed Emily. No! I shrieked. Let her go. Emily! Emily! She was screaming too, fighting with everything she had, but she was small and they were bigger and there were two of them. They dragged her toward the center of the lake while I watched, helpless, held back by Justin's iron grip. Stop struggling, Justin hissed in my ear. You're just making this harder on yourself. And on her. The faster this happens, the faster it's over. Please, I begged, all pride gone, all dignity abandoned. Please don't do this. She's 21 years old. She's just a kid. Please. Should have thought about that before you joined this family, Natalie called over her shoulder, still dragging Emily. Should have stayed in your lane, Philadelphia trash. And there it was. The truth beneath all the polite dinners and forced smiles. To them, I was trash. Emily was trash. We were nothing but unwanted garbage they decided to dispose of in the most entertaining way possible. They reached the spot they wanted. I could see it in the way the ice looked different there, slightly darker, slightly less solid. Emily was crying now, begging them to let her go, promising she'd leave and never come back, offering anything if they'd just stop. They didn't stop. Daniel counted down. 3, 2, 1. They shoved her. Emily's feet went out from under her, and she fell hard on the ice. I heard the crack. God, I'll hear that sound in my nightmares for the rest of my life, loud as a gunshot across the frozen lake. The ice fractured like a spiderweb beneath her, and then it gave way completely. She went through. 1 second she was there, visible, her hands scrabbling at the edge of the hole, her face shocked and pale. The next second, the current, because of course there was a current under the ice, because that's what happens in mountain lakes fed by underground springs, pulled her under. She disappeared. I screamed so loud I felt something tear in my throat. I fought like a wild animal, biting Justin's hand until I tasted blood, elbowing Veronica in the ribs hard enough to hear something crack. They let me go, and I ran toward the hole in the ice, dropping to my knees at the edge, plunging my arms into the freezing water, searching for her, screaming her name. Behind me, they were laughing. Laughing. I turned my head and saw them. Daniel, Natalie, Justin, Veronica, and Patricia who'd walked out onto the ice to join them. Standing there in their expensive winter coats, laughing like this was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. Help her! I screamed at them. She's drowning. Help her! Oh, she'll find her way up, Patricia said, waving her hand dismissively. The current's not that strong. She'll pop up somewhere. They always do. But she wasn't popping up. I could see shapes moving beneath the ice, dark shadows that might have been Emily or might have been nothing. The hole was already starting to freeze over, a thin skin of ice forming across the surface. She's going to die. I was sobbing now, still searching the water, my hands so cold they'd gone numb. Please, please help her. Call 911. Do something. You're so dramatic, Natalie said, still giggling. It's just a little cold water. She'll be fine. I looked at Daniel. My husband. The man who'd promised to love and cherish me. The man who'd held me and told me I was the best thing that ever happened to him. Daniel, I said, and my voice was hollow, broken. Please. He looked away. I pulled my phone from my pocket with shaking, frozen hands and dialed 911. The operator answered immediately. There's been an accident, I gasped out. Lake Ashford property in the Adirondacks. My sister fell through the ice. She's under the water. Send help. Please send help. The operator was asking questions, but I couldn't focus on the words. I dropped the phone on the ice and went back to searching, breaking the thin new ice forming over the hole, plunging my arms back into the water so cold it felt like fire. And then I saw her. A flash of green, her coat, the one I'd bought her, visible through the ice about 10 feet away. She was under there, trapped, being pushed by the current against the underside of the ice. I could see her hands, pressing upward, trying to break through. I ran to the spot and started hitting the ice with my fists, trying to break it, trying to reach her. The ice was too thick. My hands were too weak. I was screaming her name, telling her to hold on, telling her I was coming, telling her everything would be okay even though we both knew it wouldn't. She hit her head. I saw it happen through the ice, her temple colliding with something hard, a rock or a log or something beneath the surface. Blood bloomed in the water, dark and terrible. Her hands stopped moving. No. I pounded on the ice until my knuckles split and bled. Emily, Emily, wake up. Please wake up. Please don't leave me. Please, please, please. Behind me, the laughter had finally stopped. I heard footsteps, running, not walking. When I looked back, I saw them all heading toward shore, scattering like roaches when the lights come on. They were leaving. They'd done what they wanted to do, and now they were leaving us here. Leaving Emily to drown. Leaving me to watch. I heard sirens in the distance. Someone was coming. But they wouldn't be fast enough. They were never going to be fast enough. I looked down at Emily's face through the ice. Her eyes were closed. Her hair was floating around her head like a halo. She looked peaceful. Young. Like she was sleeping. Like she was already gone. I pulled my phone back out with shaking hands. Dialed a number I hadn't called in months because the Ashfords had slowly cut me off from everyone who wasn't them. My father answered on the second ring. Rebecca. His voice was concerned. He always knew when something was wrong. I took a breath. When I spoke, my voice was calm. Dead calm. The kind of calm that comes after the screaming is done, after the begging is finished, after you've watched your whole world end and something new and terrible is born in its place. Dad, I said quietly. Something's happened to Emily. Daniel's family pushed her into the lake. They said it was fun. A game. A tradition. She hit her head. She's under the ice. The ambulance is coming but... My voice broke for just a second, then steadied. Dad, I need you to do what you have to do. There was a long silence. My father, Robert Thornton, was not a violent man. He'd built his business through hard work and integrity. He'd raised us to be kind, to be fair, to believe in the goodness of people. But he was also a father. And someone had tried to kill his youngest daughter. Is she alive? He asked, his voice terrible in its quietness. I don't know, I whispered. I don't know. Where are they now? Daniel's family. I looked toward shore. They were all heading back to the house, walking quickly, not running, trying to look casual. Like nothing had happened. Like they hadn't just attempted murder. Going back to the house, I said. Acting like they did nothing wrong. Another pause. I could hear him breathing, could feel him making decisions that would change everything. Stay with Emily, he said. Do everything you can for her. The rest I'll handle. They don't know who they've messed with, Rebecca. They have no idea what they've started. I know, Dad. I love you, sweetheart. Tell Emily, his voice caught. Tell Emily her daddy's going to make this right. He hung up. I looked down at my sister's face through the ice and whispered, "Help is coming, Em. Just hold on a little longer. Please hold on." The sirens were getting closer. And somewhere behind me, the Ashford family was about to learn that there are people in this world you don't mess with. That there are lines you don't cross. That when you try to destroy someone's family, you better be prepared for what comes next. They thought they were untouchable. They thought their wealth and their name and their legacy made them gods among mortals, able to do whatever they wanted without consequences. They were about to find out how wrong they were. If you've made it this far, I need you to understand something. What happened next wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. It was about consequences. It was about making sure that people who think they can get away with anything learn that they can't. Subscribe if you haven't already, because what my father did, what I helped him do, it's not something you're going to want to miss. And check that description box for more stories about people who fought back against the ones who tried to break them. The ambulance arrived 6 minutes later. 6 minutes that felt like 6 years. 6 minutes where I knelt on the ice next to my sister and begged her not to die. They had to break through the ice to reach her. Had to pull her lifeless body out of the water that had tried to claim her. Had to start CPR right there on the frozen lake while I stood back, dripping and shaking, watching them try to bring her back. She wasn't breathing. Her lips were blue. Her skin was white as the ice beneath her. One of the paramedics looked at me, and I saw it in his eyes. The doubt, the concern, the professional assessment that said they might be too late. "Don't stop," I told him. "Don't you dare stop. That's my sister. That's my baby sister. You bring her back." They worked on her for what felt like forever. Compressions, rescue breaths, warming blankets, equipment I didn't recognize. Other emergency responders had arrived, more ambulances, a fire truck, police officers who immediately started asking what happened. I told them the truth. All of it. That Daniel Ashford's family had pushed Emily into the lake as some kind of sick game. That they'd laughed while she drowned. That they'd walked away when I'd screamed for help. The officers looked skeptical. The Ashford name meant something, even here. Wealth and influence have a way of making people doubt their own instincts, their own sense of right and wrong. But then Emily coughed. Water came up, dark and brackish. She coughed again, her body convulsing, trying to expel the lake from her lungs. The paramedics moved fast, rolling her on her side, helping her breathe, talking to her even though she couldn't respond. She was alive. Barely, maybe. Damaged. Probably. But alive. I dropped to my knees in the snow and sobbed. They loaded her into the ambulance, still unconscious but breathing on her own now. I climbed in beside her, holding her frozen hand, watching the monitors that tracked her heartbeat, her oxygen levels, her fight for survival. As we pulled away from the lake, I looked back at the house. Saw figures in the windows. The Ashford family, watching. Probably congratulating themselves on their fun afternoon. Probably already crafting the story they'd tell if anyone asked. Just an accident, a tragedy, so unfortunate, no one's fault really. They had no idea what was coming. My father had already made his first call. The hospital in Saranac Lake was small but efficient. They rushed Emily into the emergency department, calling in a trauma team, shouting medical terms I didn't understand. Hypothermia. Aspiration. Possible traumatic brain injury from the head wound. Each phrase was a knife to my heart. I sat in the waiting room with a blanket someone had draped over my shoulders, still wet from the lake, still shaking from shock or cold or rage. I couldn't tell which anymore. They'd all blended together into something that made my hands tremble and my vision blur and my chest feel like it might cave in. A nurse brought me coffee I couldn't drink and a form I couldn't focus on. Said I should call Emily's emergency contacts, her next of kin. I'd already called the only person who mattered. My phone rang at 7:47 p.m. My father. "How is she?" he asked without preamble. "Alive," I said, and the word felt both like a victory and an admission of failure. "Barely. They're running tests. She was under 4. I don't know." Maybe 3 minutes. Maybe more. They said there might be brain damage. Organ damage. They won't know until. My voice broke. Dad, I couldn't reach her. I tried. I tried so hard, but I couldn't. This is not your fault, he said, his voice hard as iron. Do you hear me, Rebecca? None of this is your fault. You didn't push her. You didn't stand by laughing. You fought to save her. You called for help. You did everything right. It feels like I did everything wrong, I whispered. Because you married into a family of monsters, he said bluntly. Because you trusted people who were never worthy of your trust. But that ends now. All of it ends now. I heard something in his voice, something cold and determined that I'd never heard before. My father was the kindest man I knew. He'd never raised his voice to me or Emily in our entire lives. He was gentle with animals, patient with strangers, generous with his time and resources. But someone had tried to murder his daughter. And Robert Thornton was done being kind. What are you doing, Dad? I asked carefully. What I should have done the moment you married that man, he said. I'm calling in every favor I'm owed. I'm pulling every string I can reach. I'm using every connection, every relationship, every bit of leverage I've built up over 40 years in business. And I'm going to make the Ashford family wish they'd never heard our name. Dad! They think they're untouchable because they have money and a fancy name and property all over the state, he continued, and his voice was getting colder with each word. They think people like us, people who work for what we have, who built our business from nothing, are beneath them. Disposable. But they're about to learn something, Rebecca. They're about to learn that the people they look down on are the ones who actually keep this world running. And when people like me decide we're done with people like them, we can do a hell of a lot of damage. I'd never heard my father talk like this. Never heard him sound so ruthless, so calculated, so absolutely certain of his own power. It should have scared me. Instead, it felt like someone had finally thrown me a lifeline in drowning water. Tell me what to do, I said. Right now. Stay with your sister. Be there when she wakes up. Document everything, her injuries, the medical reports, everything. Take pictures of any bruising, any marks. Get statements from the paramedics who pulled her out. Build an unshakable case that what happened to her was not an accident. The police are already here, I said. They took my statement. They're going to interview the Ashfords. My father made a disgusted sound. The Ashfords will lawyer up immediately. They'll claim it was a tragic accident, that Emily fell, that they tried to help her. They'll use their money and their connections to make this go away. That's what people like them always do. So what's the point? I felt hopelessness creeping in. If they're just going to get away with it anyway. They're not getting away with anything, my father said firmly. Because while they're focused on the police investigation, I'm going to be attacking from every other angle. Business, finance, reputation. I'm going to systematically dismantle everything Gregory Ashford has built, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly why. How? I asked. Because my father ran a successful printing company, yes, but the Ashfords were real estate developers with projects worth hundreds of millions of dollars. They moved in circles we'd never even touched. Dad, they're huge. Their company is massive. Their company, my father said quietly, is built on a foundation of debt, shady deals, and burned bridges. I know this because I've spent the last 3 hours making phone calls. Do you know how many people Gregory Ashford has screwed over in his career? How many contractors he's refused to pay? How many business partners he's cheated? How many regulations he's skirted? How many inspectors he's bribed? I didn't answer. I'd never thought about it. The Ashford wealth had always seemed so solid, so permanent, so unquestionable. Dozens, my father said. Maybe hundreds. And every single one of those people is angry. They've been angry for years, But they've been quiet because Gregory Ashford is powerful and vindictive, and they were scared of what he'd do if they spoke up. But guess what happens when someone gives them permission to speak? When someone coordinates their testimony. When someone promises them legal protection and financial backing. They talk, I breathed. They sing, my father corrected. I've already got commitments from 5 contractors willing to testify about unpaid wages. 3 former business partners ready to document fraud. 2 building inspectors who'll admit on record that they were bribed to overlook violations. And that's just in the first 3 hours, Rebecca. Imagine what I'll have by tomorrow. By next week. By next month. I felt something stirring in my chest. Not quite hope. Hope felt too fragile, too dangerous. But maybe possibility. Maybe the first glimmerings of justice. And that's just the business side, my father continued. I've also called your Uncle James. Uncle James. My mother's brother. FBI White-Collar Crime Division. Oh, I said softly. Oh, indeed, my father said, and I could hear the grim satisfaction in his voice. James has been wanting to investigate the Ashford Company for years, but he never had enough to get a warrant. Now he does. Now he has a violent assault, witness statements, a clear pattern of believing they're above the law. That's enough to start digging. And once the FBI starts digging into Gregory Ashford's finances, they're going to find all sorts of interesting things. How long will that take? I asked. Not long, my father said. James is already putting together a team. They'll execute search warrants within 48 hours. The Ashfords will wake up Wednesday morning to federal agents seizing their records. And once that happens, once that news breaks, their house of cards starts falling. What about Daniel? I asked, because I had to know. Had to understand if my husband would face consequences for standing there and watching while his family tried to kill my sister. My father was quiet for a long moment. What do you want to happen to Daniel? He finally asked. I thought about my husband. The man I'd loved. The man I'd thought I'd spend my life with. The man who'd stood on that frozen lake and watched his sister push Emily through the ice and done absolutely nothing to stop it. The man who'd walked away while I'd screamed for help. I want him to lose everything, I said, and my voice was steady. His family's company. His money. His reputation. Everything. I want him to understand what it feels like to be powerless. To be at the mercy of people who hate you. To lose the thing you love most and have no one care about your pain. Then that's what will happen, my father said simply. I promise you, Rebecca. These people will pay for what they did. Every single one of them. We talked for a few more minutes about logistics, when my parents would arrive at the hospital, what lawyers I should contact, how to protect myself legally and financially from Daniel and his family. Then he had to go, had more calls to make, more pieces to put in motion. Before he hung up, he said, Your sister is going to be okay. She's a Thornton. We don't break that easily. I wanted to believe him. Emily came out of emergency surgery around midnight. The doctors had to relieve pressure on her brain from the swelling caused by the head injury. They'd warmed her carefully, treating the hypothermia that had nearly stopped her heart. They'd drained fluid from her lungs, the lake water that had tried to drown her from the inside. She was in critical condition. Induced coma. Machines breathing for her. Monitors tracking every vital sign. But she was alive. I sat beside her bed and held her hand and told her everything was going to be okay. Told her dad was handling it. Told her the people who'd hurt her would pay. Told her I was sorry. So sorry for bringing her into a family that had wanted to destroy her. My parents arrived at 3 in the morning. My mother, Helen, who rarely cried, took one look at Emily hooked up to all those machines and broke down. My father held her, but his eyes were dry and cold and absolutely focused. He looked at me. They called. The Ashfords. 30 minutes ago. What did they want? To explain, he said, his voice dripping with contempt. Patricia called your mother's cell phone. Said there'd been a terrible accident. Said Emily had fallen through the ice despite their warnings. Said they tried to help but Rebecca, you, had been hysterical and wouldn't let them near her. Said they were devastated and wanted to help however they could. I felt rage surge through me, so hot and sudden I thought I might be sick. They're lying, I said unnecessarily. They pushed her. I watched them do it. They laughed. I know, my father said. I told Patricia exactly what I thought of her story. I told her I knew the truth. And I told her that by the time I was done with her family, they'd wish they'd never been born. What did she say? She threatened to sue me for slander, my father said with a cold smile. Then she had Gregory get on the phone. He threatened to destroy our business. Said he had connections everywhere, that we'd never work again, that he'd make sure we were ruined. And I laughed, my father said. I laughed and told him he had 48 hours before his entire world collapsed. Then I hung up. My mother spoke for the first time, her voice raw from crying. Is that true? 48 hours. Maybe less, my father said. He pulled out his phone and showed me a text message. It was from Uncle James. 3 words, warrants approved. Tomorrow. Tomorrow. Tuesday morning. In less than 12 hours, the FBI would descend on Ashford Properties and start pulling apart every deal, every contract, every financial record they'd ever created. And the best part? The Ashfords had no idea it was coming. There's something else, my father said carefully. I've been in touch with a journalist. Sarah Chen from the New York Times. A reporter. I asked, surprised. Why? Because the law is slow, he said. The courts take time. Trials can drag on for years. But public opinion. He smiled grimly. Public opinion can destroy someone overnight. And Sarah's been investigating the Ashford family for months. She's been trying to build a story about their business practices, their history of skirting regulations, their pattern of intimidation. She's had pieces of the puzzle, but not enough to publish. Until now. What changed? You, he said simply. You're the missing piece. A direct witness to them committing assault. Someone credible and sympathetic who can go on record about their cruelty. She wants to interview you. Tell your story. Put a human face on what the Ashfords really are beneath all that polish and wealth. I thought about it. About my story, our story, Emily's and mine, being printed in the New York Times for everyone to read. About the world knowing what the Ashfords had done. About them facing social consequences even if legal ones took years to materialize. When does she want to talk? I asked. She's driving up tonight. She'll be here by morning. I looked at Emily, still unconscious, still fighting for her life. Thought about how the Ashfords were probably sleeping peacefully in their lake house right now, convinced they'd gotten away with it. Convinced their money and name would protect them like it always had. Tell her I'll talk, I said. Tell her I'll tell her everything. My father nodded. It's going to get ugly, Rebecca. Once this goes public, there's no taking it back. The Ashfords will attack you. They'll try to destroy your credibility, paint you as a liar, a gold digger, someone with an agenda. It won't be easy. Good, I said, and I meant it. I don't want easy. I want justice. I want them to hurt the way Emily's hurting. The way I'm hurting. The way every single person they've ever screwed over is hurting. My father pulled me into a hug, and I finally let myself cry. Not hopeless tears anymore. These were different. These were the tears of someone who'd been powerless but was finding her power again. Someone who'd been silenced but was about to speak. Someone who'd been broken but was being forged into something new and sharp and dangerous. The Ashfords had made a catastrophic mistake. They'd hurt my family. And now they were about to learn what happened when you underestimated people like us. When you dismissed us as too small, too poor, too insignificant to fight back. We weren't small. We were a hurricane they never saw coming. And by the time we were done, there wouldn't be anything left of their perfect empire but rubble and regrets. Tuesday morning arrived with winter sunlight streaming through the hospital windows. Emily was still unconscious, but her vitals were stabilizing. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. The swelling in her brain was going down. Her lungs were clear. She was fighting. She was surviving. At 6:47 a.m., my phone exploded with notifications. The FBI had executed search warrants at Ashford Properties headquarters in Manhattan, at their development sites across 3 states, at Gregory Ashford's personal office, at their accountant's firm, at 3 different banks that held their accounts. Federal agents had walked into their pristine offices with boxes and digital forensic equipment and orders to seize everything. And the news cameras had been there to capture all of it. My father had made sure of that. By 8 a.m., it was the top story on every New York news outlet. Ashford Properties under federal investigation. FBI raids real estate empire. Major developer facing fraud allegations. By 9 a.m., trading in Ashford Properties stock, they'd gone public 2 years ago, was halted due to volatility. The share price had already dropped 40%. By 10 a.m., 3 major banks had frozen the Ashfords' lines of credit. By 11 a.m., contractors were holding a press conference detailing years of unpaid wages. By noon, former business partners were coming forward with allegations of fraud. And at 1 p.m., the New York Times published Sarah Chen's article, A Pattern of Privilege, Inside the Ashford Family's Culture of Cruelty. The article was devastating. It detailed everything: the unpaid contractors, the bribed inspectors, the skirted regulations. But the centerpiece, the heart of the story, was Emily and me. Our story. The lake. The pushing. The laughing. The attempted murder disguised as a family tradition. Sarah had included my interview, my words about watching my sister sink beneath the ice while my husband's family laughed. About screaming for help and being ignored. About calling 911 while they walked away. She'd included hospital records, with my permission, showing Emily's injuries. Photos of the lake. The hole in the ice. Emergency response reports. She'd made it impossible to dismiss, impossible to explain away, impossible to ignore. And the public response was immediate and vicious. Within hours, the Ashfords were trending on social media. #Ashford Family. #Justice for Emily. #Privilege isn't immunity. People were sharing the article, expressing outrage, calling for arrests. Someone found old photos of the Ashford family at charity events, smiling and wealthy and perfect, and paired them with a headline about pushing a 21-year-old into a frozen lake. The contrast was damning. People started digging into the family's history, finding other stories of cruelty, other examples of them treating people as disposable. A former housekeeper came forward about wage theft and verbal abuse. A college classmate of Natalie's shared stories about bullying. A junior employee at Ashford Properties detailed a toxic work environment. The dam had broken. Years of accumulated grievances, kept quiet by fear and power imbalances, came flooding out. And I watched it all from Emily's hospital room, feeling something that might have been satisfaction or might have been grief. I still couldn't tell which. My phone rang at 2:30 p.m. Daniel. I almost didn't answer. But I needed to hear his voice. Needed to know if there was any remorse, any guilt, any recognition of what he'd been part of. Rebecca, he said, and he sounded desperate. Panicked. Please, we need to talk. Do we? This is insane. The FBI, the article, everything, it's all spinning out of control. We need to get ahead of this. We need to present a unified front. If you just explain to people that it was an accident, that no one meant for Emily to get hurt. Is that what you think? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. That I'm going to help you. Help them. After what you did to my sister. I didn't do anything, he said, and he actually sounded like he believed it. I wasn't even the one who pushed her. That was Justin and Natalie. I was just there. You were just there, I repeated. You just stood there while your family tried to murder my sister. You just watched while she went under the ice. You just walked away while I screamed for help. You just let it happen. Rebecca, please. Is she okay? I asked suddenly. Have you asked even once if Emily is okay? If she's alive? If there's brain damage? If she's in pain? Silence. You haven't, I said, and it wasn't a question. Because you don't care. None of you care. She was just entertainment to you. A game. Something to make your boring family retreat more interesting. That's not fair, he said, but his voice was weak. You're twisting everything. Making it sound worse than it was. She almost died, Daniel. She coded in the ambulance. Her heart stopped. They had to shock her back to life. She had to have emergency brain surgery because of the head injury. She's in a coma. And you think I'm making it sound worse than it was? I didn't know it would go that far, he said, and there it was, admission. Confirmation. It was supposed to be quick. In and out of the water. Just a scare, a joke. But then the current was stronger than we thought, and she hit her head, and everything went wrong. Everything went wrong the moment you decided to push a human being into freezing water, I said. Everything went wrong when you thought that was acceptable behavior. Everything went wrong when you looked at my sister and saw someone you could hurt for fun. My family is being destroyed, he said, and his voice cracked. Do you understand that? My father's company is collapsing. We've lost millions in stock value. Our projects are being shut down. Banks won't lend to us. We're being investigated by the FBI. Our name is toxic. Everything we've built for generations is falling apart. Good, I said simply. Good. He sounded shocked. That's all you have to say? Good. What did you expect, Daniel? That you'd try to kill my sister and there'd be no consequences? That your money and your name would protect you like they always have? That people like me, people like Emily, are supposed to just accept whatever you do to us and stay quiet about it? I didn't think you'd try to destroy us, he said, and he actually sounded hurt. Like I'd betrayed him. Like I was the villain in this story. I didn't destroy you, I said coldly. You destroyed yourselves. You destroyed yourselves the moment you decided that hurting people was entertainment. That terrorizing someone was tradition. That attempted murder was acceptable family bonding. All I did was make sure everyone knew the truth about who you really are. My mother is having panic attacks, he said. Natalie is getting death threats. Justin's wife is talking about leaving him. My father had a heart attack scare this morning from the stress. Are you happy now? Is this what you wanted? I thought about Emily, tubes down her throat, machines keeping her alive, facing weeks or months of recovery if she recovered at all. I thought about sitting beside that hole in the ice, watching my sister's body drift beneath the frozen surface, screaming for help that never came. Not even close, I said. This doesn't even begin to balance the scales. But it's a start. I can't believe you're doing this, he said. After everything I gave you. The life I gave you. The opportunities. The money. The home. You were nothing when I met you, and I made you into. Into what? I interrupted, my voice sharp as broken glass. Into a doormat. Into someone so desperate for approval that I let your family treat me like garbage? Into a woman who forgot who she was because she was so busy trying to become who you wanted? You didn't give me anything, Daniel. You took my confidence, my independence, my career, my sense of self. And then you stood there and watched while your family tried to take my sister's life. I loved you, he said, and he was crying now. Actually crying. I still love you. You don't know what love is, I said. Love doesn't stand by while someone you care about suffers. Love doesn't protect cruelty. Love doesn't choose family loyalty over basic human decency. Whatever you felt for me, it wasn't love. It was ownership. And I'm done being owned. What happens now? He asked, his voice small. Are you filing for divorce? My lawyer is filing papers today, I said. And before you think about fighting it, before you think about trying to drag it out or make it difficult, you should know that I'm prepared to testify in any criminal proceedings against your family. I'm prepared to cooperate fully with the FBI investigation. I'm prepared to do whatever it takes to make sure justice is served. You'd testify against me? He sounded shocked. Against your own husband. You're not my husband anymore, I said. You stopped being my husband the moment you chose them over me. Over us. Over everything we were supposed to be building together. You're just someone I used to know. Someone I made a mistake about. Rebecca. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from fear or sadness. From power. From the realization that I didn't need him, didn't need his family, didn't need any of the things I'd thought were so important. I had my real family, my parents, my sister, the people who'd loved me before the Ashford name, who'd love me after. That was enough. That had always been enough. A nurse came in to check Emily's vitals. She smiled at me, kind and professional, adjusting 4 lines and making notes on a chart. Any change? I asked. Her brain activity is good, the nurse said. Strong responses to stimuli. The doctors are optimistic that when we start bringing her out of the coma in a few days, she'll be responsive. You should talk to her. Even though she can't respond, she can probably hear you. After the nurse left, I pulled my chair closer to Emily's bed and took her hand. Hey, Em, I said softly. It's me. I don't know if you can hear this, but Dad's handling everything. The Ashfords are done. Their company is collapsing. The FBI is investigating them. Everyone knows what they did to you. To us. I paused, wiping tears from my eyes. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm so sorry I brought you into that world. Sorry I trusted them. Sorry I didn't see what they were until it was too late. But I promise you, Em, they're going to pay. Every single one of them is going to pay for what they did. Her monitors beeped steadily. Her chest rose and fell with the ventilator's rhythm. She looked so young, so vulnerable. When you wake up, I continued, things are going to be different. I'm going to be different. I'm not going to be that person anymore, the one who made herself small, who apologized for existing, who thought she had to earn love instead of expecting it freely. I'm going to be the sister you deserve. The one who protects you. The one who fights for you. I squeezed her hand gently. So you need to wake up, okay? You need to fight through this and come back to me. Because we have a whole life ahead of us, and I'm not doing it without you. You're my best friend, Em. You're my whole heart. And I need you. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. Just 3 words, but they changed everything. Phase 2 begins. I looked up from the phone, out the window at the winter landscape. Somewhere out there, the Ashfords were scrambling, panicking, watching their world burn down around them. And we weren't even close to done. Phase 2, as my father explained it to me that evening, was about making sure the Ashfords couldn't rebuild. About ensuring that this wasn't just a temporary setback they could recover from with enough time and money, but a complete and total dismantling of everything they'd built. The FBI investigation is good, he said, sitting across from me in the hospital cafeteria while my mother stayed with Emily. But investigations can be inconclusive. Cases can fall apart. Lawyers can create reasonable doubt. We need to make sure that even if the criminal charges don't stick, the Ashfords are finished. How? I asked, exhausted from days of fear and anger and no sleep. By hitting them where it really hurts, he said. Their reputation. Their business relationships. Their social standing. Everything that makes them who they are. He pulled out a folder thick with documents and spread them across the table. These, he said, are signed statements from 43 people who've been wronged by the Ashford family over the past 2 decades. Contractors who weren't paid. Employees who were abused. Business partners who were defrauded. Tenants who were exploited. Every single one of them is willing to go public. To testify. To make sure the world knows exactly who the Ashfords really are. I looked through the statements, reading story after story of casual cruelty, of power used to exploit and harm, of people's livelihoods destroyed because the Ashfords found it convenient or amusing or profitable. There's more, my father continued. Uncle James found some interesting things during the FBI raid. Turns out the Ashford Company has been using a complex web of shell corporations to hide assets, avoid taxes, and engage in what's essentially money laundering. Gregory's personal offshore accounts hold about $4 to $7 million that he never declared to the IRS. My eyes widened. That's tax evasion on a massive scale, my father finished. Federal crime. Could mean years in prison, not just fines. The FBI is building a case that should be ironclad. Between the financial crimes and the assault on Emily, Gregory Ashford is looking at serious prison time. What about the others? Patricia, Justin, Natalie. Patricia was present during the assault. She directed it, encouraged it, and did nothing to stop it or help Emily afterward. That makes her culpable. Justin and Natalie actually pushed Emily into the water, so they're looking at assault charges, possibly attempted murder depending on how the DA wants to prosecute it. And Daniel. My father's expression hardened. Daniel was complicit. He witnessed a crime and did nothing to stop it or report it. He's looking at accessory charges at minimum. But there's something else. He pulled out another document. Daniel's been having an affair. I blinked, surprised by how little I felt at that revelation. No hurt, no betrayal, just a sort of distant acknowledgement. With who? A woman named Melissa Bradford. Works at his father's company. It's been going on for about 8 months. 8 months. Right around when he started becoming distant. When he started staying late at the office. When he stopped being present in our marriage. How did you find this out? Private investigator, my father said simply. I wanted to make sure you had leverage in the divorce. New York's a no-fault state, but adultery can still affect distribution of assets, especially when it can be proven that he spent marital funds on the affair. Which he did. Hotels, dinners, gifts. All paid for with credit cards in both your names. I should have felt something. Anger, maybe. Hurt. But I was empty. The man I'd thought I'd married had never really existed. The real Daniel was someone who cheated on his wife, who stood by while his family committed assault, who cared more about protecting his family's reputation than doing what was right. I want everything documented, I said. I want the affair, the financial records, everything. I want him to have to stand in court and admit what he did. Who he really is. Your lawyer is already on it, my father said. We're going for full dissolution of assets. Everything gets split, and given his behavior, you should be able to make a strong case for more than 50%. The apartment, the car, his trust fund, it's all in play. I don't want his money, I said. I just want him to understand that actions have consequences. That you can't treat people like they're disposable and expect them to just accept it. My father reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You're stronger than I ever imagined, he said quietly. Stronger than I raised you to be, maybe. Your mother and I, we taught you to be kind, to forgive, to give people chances. But we forgot to teach you to be ruthless when necessary. To fight back when someone tries to destroy you. You taught me everything I needed, I said. You taught me that family matters. That loyalty matters. That protecting the people you love is the most important thing. I just forgot for a while. Let the Ashfords make me forget. But I remember now. He smiled, but it was sad. I'm sorry you had to learn this way. Sorry you had to lose your marriage, your trust, your innocence about how cruel people can be. I'm not, I said, surprising myself. I mean, I'm sorry about Emily. I'm sorry she got hurt. But me. I needed this. I needed to see what I'd become. Needed to understand that being kind doesn't mean being weak. That forgiveness doesn't mean accepting abuse. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do is burn the whole thing down and start over. Over the next few days, the dominoes continued to fall. Wednesday, 3 major investors in Ashford Properties pulled their funding, citing the federal investigation and reputation damage. Without that capital, 2 major projects ground to a halt, leaving hundreds of workers suddenly unemployed. Those workers held a press conference blaming the Ashfords for their lost jobs, for putting profits and egos above people's livelihoods. Thursday, the New York State Attorney General announced a separate investigation into Ashford Properties' business practices, focusing on tenant exploitation and discriminatory rental practices. Turned out the Ashfords had been systematically denying housing to people based on race, religion, and national origin for years, hiding behind coded language and business decisions. Friday, Gregory Ashford's heart attack scare turned into a real heart attack. He collapsed at his lawyer's office and was rushed to the hospital. The news coverage was extensive, and while some people expressed sympathy, more people pointed out that stress from getting caught committing crimes doesn't absolve you of those crimes. Saturday, Natalie was arrested. She'd been getting death threats online, which I didn't condone. Violence is never the answer, and she'd responded to one of them with a threat of her own. Explicit. Detailed. Enough to warrant assault charges. She spent the night in jail before her lawyer could get her out, and the mugshot that circulated online showed her looking nothing like the polished, privileged princess she'd always presented herself as. Sunday, Justin's wife, Veronica, filed for divorce. The papers cited irreconcilable differences, but sources close to the family. My father had cultivated relationships with former Ashford employees who were more than happy to talk, said it was because she couldn't handle being associated with the family anymore. Her own family, old money from Connecticut, had basically disowned her for marrying into the Ashfords, and now she was trying to salvage her reputation. Monday, Patricia had a breakdown. Complete psychological collapse. She was admitted to a private psychiatric facility after being found wandering around their Westchester estate in her nightgown, screaming about how we'd destroyed her family, how we were nobody, how this wasn't fair. I listened to all of this from Emily's hospital room, watching my sister slowly heal while the Ashford empire crumbled in real time. Emily was brought out of her induced coma on Tuesday, exactly 1 week after the incident. I was there, holding her hand, when her eyes fluttered open. "Becca," she whispered, her voice hoarse from the breathing tube they'd removed that morning. "I'm here," I said, trying not to cry and failing miserably. "I'm right here, Em." "What happened?" Her eyes were confused, unfocused. "Why am I in the hospital?" The doctors had warned me about this, that she might not remember the incident clearly, that the trauma and the head injury could cause memory loss around the event. "You had an accident," I said carefully, "at the lake house. You fell through the ice." She frowned, trying to remember. Daniel's family, they were. Her eyes suddenly widened with fear. They pushed me. They pushed me and I couldn't breathe, I couldn't get out, I hit my head and... "Sure," I said, gently stroking her hair. "It's okay. You're safe now. You're safe and they can't hurt you anymore." "Where are they?" she asked, looking around the room like they might appear at any moment. "Far away from here," I said. "And they're never going to hurt anyone again. I promise." The doctors came in then, needing to run tests, to assess her cognitive function, to check for lasting damage from the brain injury. I was asked to step outside while they worked. In the hallway, I found my father waiting with my mother. They'd been taking shifts, one of them always at the hospital, making sure Emily was never alone, making sure I had support. "She's awake," I said, and my mother burst into tears. "Thank God," she breathed. "Oh, thank God." "She remembers," I added, "what they did. She remembers being pushed." My father's expression went cold and hard. "Good. That means she can testify." can give her own account of what happened. She's traumatized, Dad, I said. I'm not putting her through a trial, through testimony, through reliving. I know, he said gently. We won't ask her to do anything she's not ready for. But Rebecca, her memory, her testimony, it's powerful. It corroborates everything you said. It makes their story impossible to maintain. If she's willing, when she's ready, it could be the final nail in their coffin. I looked through the small window in Emily's door, watched the doctors examining her, saw her looking so small and scared in that hospital bed. She gets to decide, I said firmly. When she's healed, when she's ready, she gets to decide what she wants to do. We don't push her. We don't pressure her. We let her choose. Agreed, my father said. But you should know, the district attorney contacted me this morning. They're building a case. Assault, reckless endangerment, possibly attempted murder for Justin and Natalie. Accessory for Daniel and Patricia. They want to move forward with or without Emily's testimony, but having it would make their case bulletproof. How long before charges are filed? Could be days, could be weeks. They are being thorough. They know the Ashfords will fight this with everything they have left, so the case needs to be airtight. That afternoon, while Emily slept and my parents went to get food, I sat in the hospital chapel. I'm not particularly religious, hadn't been to church regularly since I was a kid, but I needed somewhere quiet. Somewhere to think. I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago. Desperate for approval. Willing to sacrifice who I was to fit into someone else's vision of who I should be. So afraid of being alone that I'd accepted treatment I never should have tolerated. That woman was gone. Burned away in the freezing water of that lake, drowned along with all my illusions about the Ashfords and who they were. In her place was someone harder. Someone who understood that kindness without boundaries is just self-destruction. That forgiveness without accountability is just permission for more harm. That sometimes love means being willing to fight, to burn bridges, to destroy the people who try to destroy you. I didn't like that I'd had to become this person. Didn't like that the world had shown me how cruel people could be, how little money and privilege had to do with basic human decency. But I was grateful too. Grateful that I'd found my strength before it was too late. Grateful that Emily had survived to see me fight for her. Grateful that my parents had shown me what real family looked like, not the Ashfords with their traditions of cruelty, but people who showed up, who protected each other, who used their power to shield instead of harm. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. We need to talk. Please. I'm at the apartment. Come home. Home. He still thought of that place as our home. Still thought there was an us to salvage. I texted back, I'm not coming. There's nothing to say. His response was immediate, there's everything to say. I'm sorry. I know I messed up. I know my family went too far. But we can fix this. We can start over. Please give me a chance to explain. I stared at the message for a long moment. Thought about the Daniel I'd fallen in love with at that charity gala all those years ago. The charming, attentive man who'd made me feel special. Who'd promised me a beautiful life. That man had either never existed, or he'd been buried so deep under family expectations and toxic loyalty that he was irretrievable. Either way, he was gone. I typed, the only thing I want from you is a signature on divorce papers. Everything else you have to say, you can say to my lawyer. We're done. Daniel. We've been done since the moment you chose your family over basic human decency. I hope someday you understand what you lost. Not me. I was never the prize you thought I was. But yourself. The person you could have been if you'd been brave enough to be better than them. I blocked his number before he could respond. That evening, Uncle James called. He rarely contacted me directly. Most communication went through my father, so I knew it must be important. Rebecca, he said without preamble. I need to tell you something. Off the record, just between us. Okay. The investigation we're running on Ashford Properties, it's bigger than I initially thought. We've found evidence of involvement with organized crime. Money laundering for some pretty dangerous people. Gregory Ashford got in bed with the wrong folks about 15 years ago when his company was struggling, and has been tied to them ever since. My blood ran cold. Organized crime? Like, mob? Something like that. Different players, but same basic concept. Point is, these are people who don't like attention, who don't like their business associates bringing federal heat down on them. And right now, Gregory Ashford is bringing a lot of heat. What are you saying? I'm saying the Ashfords might be in danger. Real danger. The kind we can't protect them from. We're offering them protective custody if they cooperate with the investigation, but so far, Gregory's refused. He thinks his lawyers can make this all go away. Can they? Not a chance. We have his financial records, his communications, witness testimony from his accountants who flipped to save themselves. We have him cold on tax evasion, fraud, and money laundering. He's going to prison, Rebecca. The only question is for how long. I should have felt victorious. This was beyond anything I'd imagined, not just social ruin and business collapse, but actual prison time. Real consequences. Instead, I felt tired. Thank you for telling me, I said. I appreciate you keeping me in the loop. Rebecca, Uncle James said carefully, you need to be careful too. These people he's involved with, if they think you're the reason their business pipeline got shut down, if they think you brought this attention on Gregory, they might come after you. After your family. Fear spiked through me. Are we in danger? I don't think so. You're too visible right now, and hurting you would just bring more attention. But I've arranged for security. Plainclothes officers who'll keep an eye on the hospital, on your parents' house, on you. Just as a precaution. After we hung up, I sat with that information, trying to process it. The Ashfords hadn't just been cruel and privileged, they'd been actual criminals. Connected to dangerous people. Living a lie so deep that it had consumed everything they were. And I'd married into it. Been part of it, even unknowingly. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in Emily's room, listening to the steady beep of her monitors, thinking about everything that had happened and everything still to come. Around 3 a.m, Emily stirred. Her eyes opened, found me in the darkness. You're still here, she whispered. I'm always here, I said. I'm not leaving you. I was so scared, Becca, she said softly. Under the water. I couldn't breathe. I kept thinking I was going to die and I'd never see you again. Never see Mom and Dad. Never get to do all the things I wanted to do. I moved to her bedside, took her hand. But you didn't die. You fought. You survived. Because of you, she said. I heard you. Under the water. I heard you screaming my name, telling me to hold on. And I did. I held on because you told me to. Tears rolled down my face. You're the strongest person I know, Em. I want to help, she said suddenly. Whatever you're doing to them, whatever Dad's doing, I want to help. I want them to pay for what they did. You don't have to. Yes, I do, she interrupted, her voice stronger now despite her weakness. They tried to kill me, Becca. They pushed me into that water and laughed while I drowned. They need to face consequences. Real consequences. And if my testimony can help make that happen, then I want to give it. I looked at my little sister, barely 21, lying in a hospital bed because of someone else's cruelty, and I saw something I hadn't expected. I saw someone who'd been broken and was choosing to be fierce. Someone who'd been victimized and was refusing to stay a victim. Someone who understood that justice doesn't just happen, you have to fight for it. Okay, I said. When you're ready. When the doctors clear you. We'll talk to the district attorney together. And we'll make sure that everyone knows exactly what the Ashfords are. She smiled weakly. Good. Because I'm tired of being scared. I'm tired of people like them thinking they can do whatever they want. I want to be the person who stops them. Then that's exactly who you'll be, I said. Outside the window, dawn was breaking. A new day. Another step toward justice. The Ashfords' empire was falling. And Emily and I were still standing. Emily's recovery was slow but steady. By the end of the second week, she was walking short distances with help. By week 3, she was insisting on going outside, desperate for fresh air and sunshine after so many days trapped in sterile hospital rooms. The doctors were amazed by her progress, calling her resilient, determined, a medical success story. But I knew the truth. Emily wasn't just physically recovering. She was preparing for battle. She spent hours with the district attorney's office, giving her statement, going over every detail of what happened at the lake. She recorded a formal deposition, her voice steady and clear as she described being pushed through the ice, the terror of being unable to breathe, the moment her head hit something solid and the world went dark. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Linda Vasquez, said it was the most compelling testimony she'd heard in 20 years of practicing law. Juries are going to love her, Linda told me privately after one of the sessions. She's young, sympathetic, articulate, and completely credible. When she tells her story, there won't be a dry eye in the courtroom. When's the trial? I asked. We're hoping for early spring. The Ashfords' lawyers are trying every delay tactic in the book, but Judge Morrison doesn't have much patience for their games. She's fast-tracking this as much as possible. What are they being charged with? Linda pulled out a file, flipping through pages. Justin and Natalie Ashford, assault in the first degree, reckless endangerment, conspiracy to commit assault. Daniel Ashford, accessory to assault, reckless endangerment, filing a false statement to police. He initially lied about what happened when questioned. Patricia Ashford, conspiracy to commit assault, reckless endangerment, child endangerment, obstruction of justice. Child endangerment. Emily's 21. New York law defines anyone under 22 as a child in certain circumstances, especially in cases involving extreme recklessness with potential fatal consequences. We're arguing that Patricia, as the organizer of this event, endangered a young person in her care. It's a stretch, but we think it'll stick. And Gregory. Linda's expression grew more serious. Gregory's situation is complicated. He wasn't present during the assault on Emily, so we can't charge him there. But the FBI has him on multiple counts of wire fraud, tax evasion, money laundering, and racketeering. He's looking at 20 to 30 years in federal prison if convicted on all counts. 20 to 30 years. Gregory Ashford was 68 years old. A sentence like that would mean he'd die in prison. I waited for the guilt to come, for the sympathy I'd been raised to feel for anyone suffering. It didn't come. Good, I said simply. Linda studied me for a moment. You've changed since I first met you. You were so uncertain then. Fragile, maybe. Now you're done being a victim. I suggested. She smiled. I was going to say formidable. You're going to make an excellent witness, Rebecca. The jury's going to see you as someone who tried everything to fit into this family, who genuinely loved and trusted them, and who they betrayed in the worst possible way. It's a powerful narrative. It's not a narrative, I said quietly. It's just my life. I know, Linda said gently. But in a courtroom, every life becomes a story. And your story, yours and Emily's, it's one that's going to resonate. The pre-trial hearings began in early March. I attended every single one, sitting in the gallery, watching the Ashfords and their expensive lawyers argue motion after motion trying to get evidence suppressed, charges dismissed, testimonies excluded. They looked different than I remembered. Diminished somehow. Gregory had lost weight, his expensive suits hanging loose on his frame. Patricia looked decades older, her carefully maintained beauty ravaged by stress. Justin and Natalie sat together, both looking sullen and scared, no longer the confident, cruel people who'd laughed on that frozen lake. Daniel sat slightly apart from his family, almost like he was trying to distance himself from them while still being present. He looked awful, unshaven, circles under his eyes, a defeated slump to his shoulders that I'd never seen before. Our eyes met once during a recess. He looked at me with such desperate longing, such obvious regret, that I almost felt something. But then I remembered his hand on my thigh at that last dinner before everything went to hell, his casual participation in his family's plan, the way he'd walked away while I'd screamed for help. I looked away first. He didn't exist to me anymore. The trial itself was set for April 15th. Both the state assault case and the federal financial crimes would be tried separately, but around the same time. The media attention was intense. The Ashfords had become a national symbol of privilege and cruelty, their fall from grace a story people couldn't get enough of. Documentary crews were already making films about them. A podcast called The Ice Lake Incident had become the #1 show on all platforms. Someone had written a book proposal about our story. I'd been offered a substantial amount of money to participate and had refused. This wasn't entertainment to me. It was my life. My sister's trauma. Our family's pain. But I couldn't stop other people from telling the story. It had taken on a life of its own, bigger than just us, bigger than just the Ashfords. It had become about something larger, about wealth and power and what happens when people believe they're above consequences. In late March, something unexpected happened. Daniel reached out through his lawyer, asking to meet with me. No lawyers, no recordings, just the two of us. He had something he wanted to say. I should have refused. Should have maintained the distance I'd worked so hard to establish. But curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to know what he could possibly have to say at this point, what words he thought could make any difference. We met at a coffee shop in neutral territory, a quiet place in Midtown Manhattan, far from anywhere either of us had ever been together. I arrived first, ordered coffee I wouldn't drink, and waited. Daniel walked in looking like a ghost of himself. He'd lost significant weight. His clothes were rumpled. He needed a haircut. This wasn't the polished, confident man I'd married. This was someone who'd been broken by consequences he'd never expected to face. He sat down across from me without ordering anything. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. I didn't respond. Just waited. "I'm testifying," he said abruptly. "Against my family. The DA offered me a deal, reduced charges in exchange for full cooperation. And I'm taking it." That surprised me. Daniel turning on his family, breaking the loyalty that had seemed more important to him than anything else, including me. "Why?" I asked. "Because you were right," he said simply. "About all of it. About them. About what we did. About who I became." "Little late for realizations," I said coldly. "I know. Believe me, I know. But I need you to understand, I didn't see it while it was happening. I was so deep in their world, so used to their way of seeing things, that I genuinely thought." He stopped, struggling for words. "I thought it was normal. That families like mine did things differently, played by different rules, and that was just how it was." "You thought attempted murder was normal?" "No," he said quickly. "No, I didn't. But in the moment, I convinced myself it wasn't that serious. That it was just a prank that went wrong. That Emily would be fine. I rationalized it. Made excuses. Told myself it was tradition, it was family, it was—" He stopped again. "I was lying to myself. And I know that now." "What made you stop lying?" He looked at me with eyes full of pain. "Losing you. Watching you walk away without a second glance. Realizing that you'd rather start over with nothing than stay with me. That told me something I'd been refusing to see, that I'd become someone not worth staying with. Someone who destroyed the best thing in his life because he was too cowardly to stand up to his family." I sipped my coffee, let him sit with his discomfort. He deserved worse than discomfort, but this was a start. "I've been in therapy," he continued. "Real therapy, not the kind my mother always insisted was for weak people. And my therapist helped me see things clearly. The way I was raised, it wasn't normal. The way my family operates, it's toxic. The things they taught me about power and control and who matters and who doesn't, it's all deeply, fundamentally wrong." Congratulations on your breakthrough, I said, unable to keep the sarcasm from my voice. Want a medal for realizing that trying to kill someone is bad? He flinched. I deserve that. I deserve much worse than that. But Rebecca, I need you to know, I'm not testifying for a lighter sentence. I'm testifying because it's the right thing to do. Because Emily deserves justice. Because what we did was unforgivable, and my family needs to face real consequences. They're already facing consequences, I pointed out. Your father's company is bankrupt. Your mother's in a psychiatric facility. Your family name is synonymous with cruelty. Natalie can't leave her apartment without being harassed. Justin's wife left him. Your whole world has already collapsed. Good, he said, echoing the word I'd said to him weeks ago. Because we deserved to lose everything. We deserved worse. I studied him, trying to see if this was genuine or another manipulation. He'd always been good at saying what people wanted to hear, at making himself seem reasonable and sympathetic. But something was different now. The polish was gone. The careful presentation. He looked like someone who'd hit rock bottom and was still falling. What do you want from me, Daniel? I asked. Forgiveness. Absolution. Another chance. Nothing, he said, and he sounded like he meant it. I don't want anything from you, Rebecca. You owe me nothing. Less than nothing. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to do the right thing now, even though it's far too late to matter. And I wanted to say I'm sorry. Not because I think it changes anything, but because you deserve to hear it. You're right, I said. It doesn't change anything. He nodded, accepting that. I know you're divorcing me. I know I'm going to lose everything. You, the money, my freedom, probably. I know my life is effectively over. And I know I did it to myself. To us. I destroyed everything good because I was too weak to be better than my family. You weren't too weak, I said. You chose them. Every day, you chose them. Every time I asked you to stand up for me and you didn't, every time your family treated me like garbage and you made excuses, every time you put their comfort over my dignity, those were choices. Not weakness. Choices. You're right, he said again. I chose wrong. Every single time. We sat in silence for a moment. Around us, the coffee shop hummed with normal life. People working on laptops, friends catching up, couples on dates. All of them living in a world where their worst problem was probably a work deadline or a disagreement about dinner plans. I envied them. I hope you do the right thing, I said finally. I hope you testify honestly and help put your family away. Not for a lighter sentence, not for redemption, but because it's the bare minimum of what you owe Emily. What you owe all the people your family has hurt. I will, he said. I promise. Your promises don't mean anything to me anymore, I said, standing up. But I guess we'll see. I walked out without looking back. Didn't wait to see if he called after me, didn't wonder if he sat there longer or left immediately. It didn't matter. He didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was April 15th, and making sure justice was served. Emily was thriving. Despite everything she'd been through, the physical trauma, the psychological damage, the ongoing media attention, she was becoming stronger every day. She'd returned to Cornell for the spring semester, taking a reduced course load but determined to stay on track for graduation. I'm not letting them steal my future, she'd said. They tried to steal my life. They don't get my dreams too. She'd also become something of an advocate. Started speaking at events about assault, trauma, and holding powerful people accountable. She was careful with her words. The trial was pending, and we didn't want to compromise the case, but she found ways to tell her story that resonated with people. Young women especially connected with her. They saw someone their age who'd survived something horrific and refused to be silent about it. Who understood that speaking up was scary but necessary. That sometimes the people who hurt you are the ones everyone else respects, and that makes it harder to come forward, but not impossible. Emily was becoming the person she needed when she was drowning in that lake. Someone strong, someone fierce, someone who fought back. I was so proud of her I could barely stand it. My parents were managing too, though the strain showed. My father had thrown himself into the legal battle with an intensity that worried my mother. He was sleeping less, eating less, working constantly to make sure every piece of the case against the Ashfords was bulletproof. He needs to rest, my mother confided to me one evening. But he won't. He says he can't rest until he knows they are finished. Until he knows they can never hurt anyone again. Dad always said family was everything, I reminded her. He's just proving it. I know, she said. But I'm worried about what this is costing him. What it's costing all of us. Revenge is supposed to make you feel better, but does it? Do you feel better, Rebecca? I thought about that question. Did I feel better? The Ashfords were losing everything. They faced prison, bankruptcy, permanent disgrace. Their name was mud. Their legacy was destroyed. And yet Emily still woke up with nightmares. I still flinched when I saw frozen water. My parents had spent their savings on lawyers and investigators. We'd all been consumed by this fight for months. I don't know if I feel better, I admitted. But I feel right. Like we're doing what needs to be done. Like we're making sure they face consequences for their actions. That's not revenge, Mom. That's justice. Sometimes, my mother said quietly, the line between those two things is thinner than we'd like to believe. April 15th arrived too quickly and not quickly enough. The courthouse was surrounded by media, cameras, reporters, crowds of people holding signs supporting Emily or condemning the Ashfords. Security was intense. We had to enter through a side entrance to avoid the chaos. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Journalists, legal observers, people who'd been wronged by the Ashford family and wanted to watch them finally face consequences. The energy was electric, anticipatory. The Ashfords sat at the defense table with their legal team, 5 lawyers total, all of them expensive and experienced. Gregory wasn't there. His trial was federal and separate. But Patricia, Justin, Natalie, and Daniel were all present, looking small and scared despite their lawyers' confident demeanors. Emily and I sat behind the prosecution's table with my parents. Linda Vasquez looked calm and prepared, her case files organized, her expression focused. Judge Morrison entered, and we all stood. She was a black woman in her early 60s, with a reputation for being fair but firm, sympathetic to victims but demanding of evidence. She didn't tolerate games, didn't accept excuses, and had sentenced plenty of wealthy defendants to serious time when warranted. The Ashfords' lawyers had tried to get her recused, claiming bias. She denied their motion with barely concealed contempt. "Good morning," Judge Morrison said, settling into her chair. "We're here for the trial of People versus Ashford. Let's begin with opening statements." Linda stood, walked to the center of the courtroom, and looked at the jury. 12 people of various ages, races, and backgrounds, all of whom had been carefully screened to ensure they could be impartial despite the media coverage. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Linda began, her voice clear and strong. "This is a case about power. About privilege. About what happens when people believe they're above consequences. On January 14th of this year, the defendants, Patricia Ashford, Justin Ashford, Natalie Ashford, and Daniel Ashford, participated in an assault on a 21-year-old woman named Emily Thornton. They pushed her through ice into a freezing lake. They laughed while she struggled to breathe, while she hit her head and began to drown. They walked away when her sister screamed for help. And they did this because they thought it was fun. Because they thought they could. She paused, letting that sink in. Over the next several days, you're going to hear testimony from Emily Thornton herself about the terror she experienced. You're going to hear from her sister Rebecca, who watched it happen and tried desperately to save her. You're going to hear from first responders who pulled Emily's body, and yes, I say body, because she had no heartbeat when they found her, out of that water. You're going to hear from medical professionals who fought to bring her back to life. And you're going to hear from Daniel Ashford, who has agreed to testify against his own family because even he, who participated in this assault, recognizes how wrong it was. The defense lawyers shifted uncomfortably. Having Daniel flip had clearly disrupted their strategy. The defense is going to try to convince you this was an accident, Linda continued. That it was a tradition, a game, something that got out of hand. They're going to try to paint Emily as overly dramatic, Rebecca as vindictive, and their clients as misunderstood. But I ask you to remember one simple fact. They pushed a young woman into freezing water and walked away while she drowned. Everything else is just noise. She returned to her seat. The defense's opening statement was delivered by Marcus Wellington, a silver-haired lawyer with a reputation for defending the indefensible. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, this is indeed a case about power. But not the power my learned colleague suggests. This is about the power of a narrative. The power of media attention. The power of public opinion to transform a tragic accident into a witch hunt. I felt Emily's hand grip mine. Yes, there was an accident at a lake house in January, Wellington continued. Yes, Emily Thornton fell through ice and was seriously injured. Yes, it was traumatic for everyone involved. But an accident is not a crime. A tragic mishap is not attempted murder. And participating in a family tradition, one that admittedly went terribly wrong, is not assault. He went on, painting the Ashfords as a loving family whose private traditions had been mischaracterized, who'd done everything they could to help Emily after her fall, who were being prosecuted because of their wealth and prominence rather than because of their actions. It was a masterful performance. Almost convincing, if you hadn't seen what I'd seen, hadn't heard the laughter, hadn't watched them walk away. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Every day was exhausting, an emotional marathon of testimony and evidence and legal arguments. Emily took the stand on day 4. She looked young and vulnerable in her simple dress, her auburn hair pulled back, no makeup except for a little concealer to hide the faint scar on her temple where her head had hit the rock. Linda walked her through the entire experience, step by painful step. Emily's voice remained steady as she described being surrounded on the ice, realizing they intended to push her in, fighting them and failing. She cried when describing going under the water, the cold so intense it felt like fire, the panic of not being able to breathe, the darkness closing in. I thought I was going to die, she said quietly. I thought the last thing I'd ever see was the bottom of that lake. And I could hear them laughing. Even underwater, I could hear them laughing. The jury was transfixed. Several were crying. Cross-examination was brutal. Wellington tried to suggest Emily had misunderstood, that her memory was faulty due to trauma and head injury, that she was exaggerating for sympathy and attention. Emily didn't break. I know what happened to me, she said firmly. I know what they did. And no amount of expensive lawyers or twisted questions is going to change the truth. I testified on day 7. Walked through everything I'd seen, everything I'd heard, the desperate attempts to save Emily, the phone call to my father. Linda had me identify each defendant and describe their specific role. Justin and Natalie pushing Emily, Daniel holding me back, Patricia directing it all from shore. Wellington tried to paint me as a woman scorned, seeking revenge on a family that had never fully accepted me, using my sister's accident as ammunition in a personal vendetta. Isn't it true, Mrs. Ashford, he said, that you were unhappy in your marriage? That you felt rejected by the family? That you were looking for any excuse to hurt them the way you felt hurt? No, I said calmly. What's true is that I watched them try to murder my sister. That tends to make you unhappy with people, regardless of how the marriage was going. Scattered laughter from the gallery. Judge Morrison's lips twitched but she maintained order. The first responders testified about Emily's condition when they pulled her from the water. Not breathing. No pulse. Core body temperature dangerously low. They'd worked on her for 6 minutes before getting her heart started again. In my 20 years as a paramedic, one of them said, I've seen a lot of drownings. This was one of the worst. Another minute or two, and we wouldn't have gotten her back. The medical experts testified about Emily's injuries. The head trauma. The hypothermia. The lung damage. The lasting effects she'd likely deal with for the rest of her life, increased sensitivity to cold, occasional memory issues, higher risk of future neurological problems. She's lucky to be alive, one doctor said bluntly. And calling it luck is generous. It's a miracle. Then came Daniel's testimony. He took the stand on day 12, looking like he might throw up. Patricia glared at him with such hatred I thought she might actually attack him. Natalie was crying. Justin looked betrayed and furious. Linda walked Daniel through his relationship with me, our marriage, the family dynamics. Then she got to the day at the lake. Whose idea was it to push Emily into the water? Linda asked. My mother's, Daniel said quietly. Patricia. She suggested it at breakfast that morning. Said it would be funny, that we should test Rebecca's loyalty, see if she'd stay with the family even after something like that. Gasps from the gallery. Even I hadn't known that detail, that this had been about testing me. What was your reaction to this suggestion? I thought it was a bad idea, Daniel admitted. But I didn't say anything. I just went along with it. Like I always did. Did anyone express concern about Emily's safety? Rebecca did. Later, right before it happened. She asked what we were doing, told us to stop. But we didn't listen. Why not? Daniel looked directly at me for the first time. Because we thought we were above consequences. Because we'd never faced any before. Because we genuinely believed that our money and our name meant we could do whatever we wanted. The cross-examination was vicious. Wellington tried to suggest Daniel was lying to save himself, that he was betraying his family for a lighter sentence, that his testimony was rehearsed and unreliable. But Daniel held firm. He answered every question honestly, didn't try to minimize his role or excuse his behavior. He looked like a man who decided that the truth was the only thing he had left. After 3 weeks of testimony, of evidence, of arguments and counter-arguments, both sides rested. Closing arguments were scheduled for the following Monday. I spent that weekend with Emily and my parents at their house in Philadelphia, trying to decompress, trying to prepare for whatever verdict came. Do you think they'll be convicted? Emily asked Sunday night as we sat on the back porch, watching the sunset. I don't know, I admitted. The evidence is strong. Your testimony was powerful. Daniel corroborated everything. But juries are unpredictable. And the Ashfords have good lawyers. If they're acquitted, Emily started. They won't be, I said firmly, even though I couldn't be sure. They can't be. The truth is too clear. But if they are, Emily persisted, then what? All of this was for nothing. No, I said. Even if they're acquitted criminally, they've still lost everything else. Their business, their reputation, their standing. And Gregory's federal trial hasn't even started yet. One way or another, Emily, they're facing consequences. She nodded, but I could see the fear in her eyes. The fear that justice might slip away, that powerful people might escape accountability one more time. I felt that fear too. Monday came. Closing arguments were delivered, Linda's passionate and precise, Wellington's eloquent and manipulative. The jury was given instructions by Judge Morrison and sent to deliberate. And then we waited. The jury deliberated for 2 days. 48 hours of waiting, of checking my phone constantly, of pacing hospital corridors and courthouse hallways, of lying awake at night imagining every possible outcome. Emily handled it better than I did, which was ironic considering she was the victim. She went to classes, studied for exams, lived her life with a determination that amazed me. I can't put my life on hold waiting for 12 strangers to decide if what happened to me matters, she explained. I have to keep moving forward, whether they convict or not. My parents were less composed. My father barely ate. My mother cleaned obsessively, scrubbing surfaces that didn't need cleaning, organizing closets that were already organized, channeling her anxiety into domestic productivity. I existed somewhere between Emily's calm determination and my parents' barely controlled panic. I functioned, went through the motions of daily life, answered emails, paid bills, but everything felt distant, unreal, like I was watching myself from outside my body. On Wednesday afternoon, day 2 of deliberations, my phone rang. Linda Vasquez. "We have a verdict," she said simply. "Judge Morrison wants everyone back in the courtroom in 1 hour. 1 hour. 60 minutes to prepare for whatever came next." We rushed to the courthouse, fought through the media scrum that had grown even larger now that a verdict was imminent. Inside, the courtroom filled quickly, every seat taken, people standing in the back, the air thick with anticipation. The Ashfords filed in with their lawyers. Patricia looked like she'd aged a decade in 2 days. Justin and Natalie held hands, which was oddly touching until I remembered what those hands had done. Daniel sat alone, slightly apart, his expression unreadable. Judge Morrison entered. We all stood. "The jury has reached a verdict," she announced. "Bring them in." The 12 jurors filed into the box, none of them looking at the defendants, which I'd read somewhere was a bad sign for the defense. They looked serious, somber, like people who'd had to make a difficult decision and weren't happy about it. The foreperson, a middle-aged black woman who worked as an accountant, stood when Judge Morrison asked if they'd reached a verdict. "We have, Your Honor. In the case of People versus Patricia Ashford, on the count of conspiracy to commit assault in the first degree, how do you find?" "Guilty." The courtroom erupted. Judge Morrison's gavel came down hard. "Order. I will have order in this courtroom." My heart was hammering. Emily grabbed my hand. My mother was crying. The foreperson continued reading verdicts. Patricia, guilty on all counts. Justin, guilty on all counts. Natalie, guilty on all counts. Daniel, guilty of accessory to assault and reckless endangerment, not guilty of conspiracy. His cooperation and testimony had earned him some consideration. Each guilty verdict hit like a thunderclap. The Ashfords reacted differently. Patricia collapsed in her chair, sobbing. Justin looked stunned. Natalie was screaming that it wasn't fair, that they'd done nothing wrong, until her lawyers physically restrained her. Daniel simply closed his eyes. Judge Morrison set sentencing for 3 weeks out and remanded all 4 defendants to custody pending sentencing. "Bailiff, please take the defendants into custody." Watching them be handcuffed, Patricia still crying, Justin moving like a zombie, Natalie fighting and cursing, Daniel walking quietly with his head down, was surreal. These people who'd seemed so powerful, so untouchable, were being led away to jail cells like common criminals. Because that's what they were. Not special. Not above the law. Just criminals who'd finally been caught. Outside the courthouse, Linda held a brief press conference. Emily and I stood beside her, my father's protective arm around both of us. "Today, justice was served," Linda said into a forest of microphones. The jury saw through the defense's smoke and mirrors and recognized the truth, that the Ashford family committed a serious, violent assault on a young woman, and that wealth and privilege do not exempt anyone from consequences. I want to thank Emily Thornton for her incredible courage in coming forward, in testifying, in refusing to be silenced. She is the reason we achieved this verdict. Reporters shouted questions. Emily stepped forward to the microphones, and I felt my heart swell with pride. "I just want to say," Emily began, her voice steady despite the cameras and the crowd, "that this verdict isn't just for me. It's for everyone who's ever been hurt by people more powerful than them. Everyone who's been told their pain doesn't matter. Everyone who's been afraid to speak up because they thought no one would believe them. Today proves that the truth matters. That justice is possible. That we don't have to accept cruelty from anyone, no matter how wealthy or connected they are." The questions continued, but Linda ushered us away. We had what we came for. The rest was just noise. That night, my family gathered at my parents' house. My mother cooked Emily's favorite meal, lasagna, garlic bread, Caesar salad. We opened a bottle of wine, good wine, not the expensive stuff the Ashfords had always served, but the kind you buy because you like the taste, not because of the label. "To Emily," my father said, raising his glass. "The strongest person I know." "To family," my mother added. "Real family. The kind that shows up." "To justice," Emily said quietly. "And to second chances." We clinked glasses and drank, and for the first time in months, I felt something like peace. But we weren't done yet. The verdicts were just the first step. Sentencing would determine whether this was a real victory or a symbolic one. Gregory Ashford's federal trial began 2 weeks after his family's convictions. Unlike the state trial, which had been emotional and dramatic, the federal case was clinical, precise, devastating in its detail. Uncle James and his FBI team had built an airtight case. They presented evidence of offshore accounts holding millions in undeclared income, shell corporations designed to hide assets, falsified tax returns going back 15 years, wire transfers to known organized crime figures, money laundering schemes so complex they required forensic accountants to explain to the jury. Gregory's lawyers tried every defense, claimed ignorance, blamed subordinates, argued that these were aggressive business practices rather than crimes. But the evidence was overwhelming. The jury convicted him on 18 of 20 counts. The 2 acquittals were on charges so technical that even the prosecutors admitted they were reach charges. But 18 convictions were more than enough. Gregory Ashford was looking at decades in federal prison. Sentencing day for the state convictions arrived in mid-May. The courthouse was packed again, but the energy was different, less anticipatory, more solemn. Everyone knew the Ashfords had been convicted. Now it was just a matter of finding out how severely they'd be punished. Judge Morrison took a seat and looked at the defendants, all of whom had been allowed to appear in civilian clothes rather than jail uniforms. "Before I announce sentences," she began, "I want to explain my reasoning. The defendants have been convicted of serious violent crimes. They planned and executed an assault that very nearly resulted in a young woman's death. They showed no remorse in the immediate aftermath. They attempted to cover up their actions. And they come from positions of significant privilege, which means they absolutely should have known better." She paused, letting that sink in. "However, I'm also required to consider mitigating factors." Mr. Daniel Ashford cooperated with the prosecution and testified against his co-defendants, showing at least some level of remorse and willingness to accept responsibility. The others have no prior criminal records. Ms. Emily Thornton has made a remarkable recovery, and while her suffering was significant, she has survived and is thriving. My stomach dropped. This sounded like the preamble to lenient sentences. That said, Judge Morrison continued, and her voice hardened. What these defendants did was inexcusable. They treated a human being as entertainment. They endangered her life for their amusement. And they did so with full knowledge of the risks. This court cannot and will not send a message that such behavior is acceptable, regardless of the defendants' backgrounds. She looked at Patricia first. "Patricia Ashford, you organized this event. You directed your children to assault Emily Thornton. You stood by and watched her nearly die, and you did nothing to help. You are sentenced to 8 years in state prison." Patricia gasped. 8 years. Real prison time. Not some country club minimum security facility. Justin Ashford and Natalie Ashford, you physically pushed Emily Thornton through the ice. You laughed while she drowned. You walked away when she needed help. You are each sentenced to 12 years in state prison. Natalie started crying. Justin looked like he might faint. 12 years. They'd be in their late 30s, early 40s when they got out. Daniel Ashford, while you were complicit in this assault, you ultimately came forward and told the truth. You showed genuine remorse and helped the prosecution secure convictions against your co-defendants. However, your initial participation and your failure to immediately come to Emily Thornton's aid cannot be overlooked. You are sentenced to 4 years in state prison, with a possibility of parole after 2 years if you maintain good behavior. 4 years. Less than the others, but still substantial time. Daniel nodded slowly, like he'd expected this. Judge Morrison continued, all defendants will be required to pay restitution to Emily Thornton for her medical expenses, lost wages, and pain and suffering. The exact amounts will be determined at a separate hearing, but I'm talking about significant sums. Additionally, all defendants are permanently barred from contacting Emily Thornton or Rebecca Thornton Ashford in any way. She brought her gavel down. Court is adjourned. And just like that, it was over. The Ashfords were led away to begin their sentences. Patricia was still crying. Justin and Natalie both looked shell-shocked. Daniel caught my eye one last time as the bailiff guided him toward the door. He mouthed 2 words, "I'm sorry." I didn't respond. Sorry didn't change anything. Sorry didn't give Emily back the months of recovery, the trauma she'd carry forever, the innocence she'd lost. Sorry was just a word, and words were cheap. Gregory's federal sentencing happened 2 weeks later. I didn't attend. I'd had enough of courtrooms and trials and watching the Ashfords face consequences. But my father went, and he called me immediately after. 23 years, he said, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. Gregory Ashford got 23 years in federal prison. At his age, that's essentially a life sentence. I did the math quickly. Gregory was 68. At 23 years and he'd be 91, assuming he lived that long. He'd die in prison. Good, I said, and I meant it. There's more, my father continued. The judge ordered forfeiture of all assets obtained through illegal means. That's essentially everything, the company, the properties, the offshore accounts. It's all being seized by the government. The Ashford family legacy is gone, Rebecca. Erased. There's nothing left. Nothing left. The empire they'd built over generations, the wealth they'd accumulated, the power they'd wielded, all of it gone. Taken not by competitors or market forces, but by their own corruption, their own cruelty, their own certainty that they were above the law. How do you feel? My father asked gently. Tired, I admitted. Relieved. Vindicated. Maybe. But mostly just tired. That's normal, he said. You've been fighting for months. You've been living with this trauma, this anger, this need for justice. Now that you have it, there's a void. It's going to take time to figure out how to fill that void with something positive. He was right. I'd spent so much energy on making the Ashfords pay that I hadn't thought about what came after. Who I wanted to be now that the fight was over. What I wanted to do with the rest of my life, free from their shadow. My divorce from Daniel was finalized in June. The proceedings were mercifully quick. With Daniel in prison and cooperating fully, there was no fight over assets, no prolonged negotiations. I got the apartment, the car, half of his trust fund, the half that hadn't been seized in the forfeiture. I didn't want the money, it felt tainted, but my lawyer insisted I take it. Use it for something good, she suggested. Turn his family's ill-gotten wealth into something positive. That's the best revenge. So I did. I established a foundation, the Emily Thornton Foundation for Assault Survivors. It provided financial assistance for medical bills, therapy, legal fees. It connected survivors with resources, with support groups, with people who understood. It funded research into trauma recovery. It lobbied for stronger laws protecting victims. Emily became the face of the foundation, speaking at events, sharing her story, inspiring other survivors to come forward and seek justice. She was remarkable, poised and passionate, vulnerable and fierce. She'd taken the worst thing that ever happened to her and transformed it into purpose. I worked behind the scenes, managing operations, fundraising, coordinating with other organizations. It felt good to use my skills, the marketing and design background I'd abandoned during my marriage, for something meaningful. To build something that helped people rather than just existing as decoration in someone else's life. My parents were proud. They'd been scared that this whole ordeal would break me, would turn me bitter and hard and unable to trust anyone. Instead, they saw me becoming stronger, more confident, more certain of who I was and what I wanted. "You've found yourself again," my mother said one evening as we worked together preparing materials for a foundation fundraiser. The Rebecca we knew before the Ashfords. But better. Stronger. I had good teachers, I said, hugging her. You and Dad taught me everything important. I just forgot for a while. Life settled into a new normal. Emily thrived at Cornell, graduating with honors and accepting a job with an environmental nonprofit. She had a boyfriend, a kind, gentle guy named Alex who treated her like she was precious. She still had nightmares sometimes, still flinched around frozen water, but she was healing. I started dating again, cautiously. Nothing serious, just reminding myself that not all men were like Daniel, that not all families were like the Ashfords, that intimacy and trust were still possible even after betrayal. The Ashfords became a cautionary tale. Their story was studied in law schools and business ethics courses. Documentaries were made. Books were written. They were the perfect example of how privilege without accountability corrupts, how wealth without empathy destroys, how power without conscience leads to ruin. I was occasionally asked to speak about my experience, at survivor groups, at conferences, in interviews. I usually declined, preferring to work behind the scenes. But sometimes, when I thought it would help someone else going through something similar, I said yes. The most common question I got was always the same: do you regret it? Fighting back? Destroying them? And my answer was always the same: I didn't destroy them. They destroyed themselves. I just made sure everyone knew the truth. 2 years after the convictions, I went back to the Adirondacks. Not to the Ashford Lake House. That property had been seized and sold, the proceeds going to Gregory's victims. But to a different lake nearby, one with no painful associations, just beauty and peace. Emily came with me. We rented a cabin, brought books and board games, spent a long weekend just being sisters again. On the last day, we walked down to the water's edge. It was summer, so the lake was warm and inviting, nothing like the frozen death trap that had almost claimed Emily's life. "Are you okay being here?" I asked, worried that proximity to where it happened might trigger her. "I'm okay," she said. "It's different. That was winter, was full of hate. This is summer, full of life. They don't feel like the same place at all." We stood there for a long moment, looking out at the water. "Do you ever think about them?" Emily asked quietly. "The Ashfords. Wonder how they're doing in prison." "Sometimes," I admitted. "But not as much as I used to. They don't deserve that much space in my head." "Patricia gets out in 6 years," Emily said. "Daniel might be out in a few months on parole. Natalie and Justin have 8 years left. Gregory will die there." She'd been keeping track, I realized. Still marking time by when they'd be released, when they might re-enter the world. "Does that scare you?" I asked. "A little," she said honestly. "But then I remember, they lost everything. Their money, their reputation, their family name. Even when they get out, they'll be nobody. Convicted felons with no resources and no support system. While I'll be living my life, doing meaningful work, surrounded by people who actually love me." She turned to face me, and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen in a long time: genuine peace. "They didn't break me, Becca," she said. "They tried, but they didn't. And that's my victory. Not the convictions, not the sentences, not the destroyed empire. The victory is that I'm still here, still whole, still me." I hugged her tight, this sister I'd almost lost, this brave, brilliant woman who'd survived something that should have destroyed her and came out stronger. "You're my hero," I whispered. "You know that, right?" She laughed, wiping tears from her eyes. "You're mine too. You fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. You called Dad and said do what you have to do. And he did. You both did. You saved me." "We saved each other," I corrected. We stood there as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold, and I thought about how far we'd come. From that frozen lake where everything had shattered, to this warm summer evening where everything felt possible again. The Ashfords had tried to destroy us. They'd pushed Emily into that water thinking she was nothing, that we were nothing, that people like us didn't matter. They'd been wrong. We mattered. We'd always mattered. And we'd proven it by refusing to be silent, by demanding justice, by fighting back with everything we had. And we'd won. Not perfectly. Emily still carried scars, physical and emotional. I still had trust issues, still struggled with intimacy and vulnerability. My parents had aged years in a matter of months from the stress. We'd all been changed by what happened. But we'd survived. We'd fought. We'd made sure that people who thought they were gods among mortals learned they were just humans who could bleed like everyone else. That night, back at the cabin, Emily and I stayed up late talking about the future. About her career plans, my foundation work, whether I'd ever get married again, whether she'd marry Alex. Normal things. Sister things. The kind of conversations we might have had if none of this had ever happened. Do you think you'll ever really forgive them? Emily asked around midnight, both of us getting sleepy but not wanting the conversation to end. I thought about it carefully. No, I said finally. Forgiveness is for people who show genuine remorse, who try to make amends, who become better. The Ashfords never did that. Even Daniel's testimony was more about saving himself than about real regret. They're sorry they got caught, sorry they lost everything, but I don't think they're sorry about who they are. Good, Emily said. I was worried you'd say I should forgive them. That holding on to anger was unhealthy or whatever. There's a difference between forgiveness and letting go, I said. I've let go of them. They don't control my life anymore. They don't occupy my thoughts every day. I don't fantasize about additional revenge or wish worse things on them. I've moved on. But that's not the same as forgiving. Some things are unforgivable, and what they did to you, what they tried to do to you, that's one of them. Emily nodded, looking relieved. That's how I feel too. Like I've healed, I've grown, I've built a good life. But I'm never going to say it's okay to what they did. Because it wasn't okay. It will never be okay. Exactly, I said. And anyone who tells you otherwise doesn't understand what you went through. Before we finally fell asleep, Emily said one more thing. Thank you for calling Dad. For saying do what you have to do. Because what he did, what you both did, it saved my life and gave me justice. I'll never forget that. Always, I promised. I'll always fight for you, Em. No matter what. The next morning, we drove back to the city. Back to our lives. Back to normal. But it was a different normal than before. A better one. One where we understood our own strength, our own worth, our own power. One where we knew, without question, that we mattered. And that the people who tried to say otherwise had learned, the hard way, just how wrong they were. 3 years later, I got a letter. It came from a women's correctional facility upstate. The return address showed Patricia Ashford as the sender. I stared at it for a long time, this envelope from the woman who'd orchestrated the assault on my sister, who'd stood on the shore laughing while Emily drowned. Part of me wanted to throw it away unopened. She didn't deserve my attention, my time, my emotional energy. But curiosity won. I opened it. The letter was handwritten, Patricia's once elegant script now shaky and uncertain. Asterisk Rebecca, asterisk. Asterisk, I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect you to care. But my therapist says I need to try to make amends, to acknowledge what I did, to take responsibility. Asterisk. Asterisk, I destroyed your life. I tried to destroy your sister. I did it because I could, because I'd always been able to do whatever I wanted without consequences, because I genuinely believed that people like you didn't matter as much as people like us. Asterisk. Asterisk, I was wrong. About everything. About what makes someone valuable. About what makes a life meaningful. About what real power looks like. Asterisk. Asterisk, you had power I never understood. The power of loving genuinely, of fighting for what's right, of standing up to people who tried to break you. I had money and a name, but you had something stronger. You had truth. You had courage. You had family who actually loved you. Asterisk. Asterisk, I've lost everything. My husband is dying in federal prison. My children hate me. My reputation is destroyed. I'll be 74 years old when I get out of here, with nothing and no one waiting for me. And I deserve it. Every bit of it. Asterisk. Asterisk, but the thing that haunts me most isn't what I lost. It's what I almost took from you. Emily's life. Your sister. If she had died in that lake, I would have been responsible for a murder. And I would have walked away laughing. Asterisk, what kind of person does that? What kind of monster was I? Asterisk, I don't expect forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I was. What I did. And I'm sorry. For whatever that's worth to you. Probably nothing. But I had to say it. Asterisk, Patricia. I read the letter 3 times. Looking for manipulation, for excuses, for any sign that this was another game, another attempt to minimize or justify her actions. I didn't find it. The letter seemed genuine, the words of someone who'd had years to reflect on her choices and had finally understood the magnitude of her cruelty. Did it change anything? Did her remorse undo the trauma? Did her apology heal Emily's scars or give me back the years I'd spent in a toxic marriage to her son? No. Words on paper couldn't do that. But it did something. It confirmed what I'd always believed, that the Ashfords weren't inherently evil, just incredibly damaged people who'd been raised in a culture of entitlement and never challenged until it was too late. That given enough time and consequences, even they could begin to see the truth. I showed the letter to Emily. She read it silently, her expression unreadable. What do you think? I asked. I think she's sorry, Emily said finally. I think she means it. But I also think. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I think some things are too big for apologies. Some hurts are too deep for sorry to touch. She can be genuinely remorseful and I can be genuinely uninterested in her redemption. Both things can be true. Are you going to write back? No, Emily said simply. She doesn't need my forgiveness to heal. That's her work to do, not mine. I've done my work. I've healed as much as I'm going to. Her journey is her own. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. Maybe someday I'd write back, acknowledge her apology, offer some small gesture of recognition that she tried. But not today. Today, I had better things to do. The foundation was hosting a major fundraiser. Emily was keynoting at a conference on survivor advocacy. My parents were celebrating their 45th wedding anniversary. I had a date that evening with a man who made me laugh, who treated me with respect, who understood that my past was complicated but didn't let it define me. Life was full and rich and meaningful. The Ashfords had tried to take that from us. They'd failed. And every day we lived well, every day we found joy, every day we helped someone else who'd been hurt by people more powerful than them, that was our victory. Not revenge. Not vindication. Just living. Fully. Freely. Without apology. That was the best response to what they'd tried to do to us. To be happy despite them. To thrive in spite of them. To prove that their cruelty had not, would not, could not define us. We were more than what happened to us. More than the trauma, more than the fight for justice, more than the scars we carried. We were sisters, daughters, survivors, advocates, human beings with value and purpose and futures bright with possibility. And nothing, not frozen lakes, not cruel families, not attempted murder disguised as tradition, could take that away from us. We'd made sure of it. So thank you for staying with me through this story. For hearing what happened to us, what we survived, how we fought back. I hope it helps someone out there who's facing their own impossible situation, dealing with their own powerful enemies, wondering if justice is even possible. It is. It's hard, it's painful, it costs you things you can't get back. But it's possible. And you're worth fighting for. Your life matters. Your pain matters. Your truth matters. Never let anyone convince you otherwise. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories about people who fought back, who survived, who refused to be silent, check the description box below. Because these stories need to be told. These voices need to be heard. We're not victims. We're victors. Remember that. 5 years after the trial, I sat in my office at the Emily Thornton Foundation headquarters, a bright, modern space in downtown Philadelphia, not far from where my parents had built their business all those years ago. Full circle, my mother liked to say. Everything coming back to where it started. The foundation had grown beyond my wildest expectations. What started as a small non-profit providing basic assistance to assault survivors had evolved into a national organization with chapters in 12 states, a legal advocacy program, a 24-hour crisis hotline, and partnerships with major hospitals and law enforcement agencies. We'd helped over 3,000 survivors in the past 5 years. 3,000 people who might have stayed silent, might have let their attackers go unpunished, might have blamed themselves for what happened to them. We gave them resources, support, validation, and most importantly, hope that justice was possible. Emily was the executive director now, running operations while I focused on development and fundraising. She was brilliant at it, organized, passionate, connecting with survivors in a way I never could because she'd been there. She understood the fear and the shame and the desperate need to be believed. She'd also married Alex. Their wedding had been beautiful, a small ceremony in our parents' backyard, surrounded by people who genuinely loved them, no social climbing or impressing anyone, just pure celebration of two people choosing each other. I'd been her maid of honor, and when she'd asked me to stand beside her, I'd cried. "You've always stood beside me," she'd said. "When it mattered most. This is just making it official." I thought about Daniel sometimes, though less frequently as the years passed. He'd been released from prison after serving 2 years. Good behavior, genuine remorse, successful completion of therapy programs. He tried to rebuild his life, taking a job at a small non-profit doing community outreach, living in a modest apartment in Brooklyn, keeping his head down. He'd sent me a letter when he got out, not asking for anything, just thanking me for forcing him to face who he'd been, for giving him the chance to become someone better. I'd read it once and filed it away with Patricia's letter, artifacts of a past that no longer controlled my present. Natalie and Justin were still in prison, with several more years to serve. I'd heard through the grapevine that Natalie had become a model prisoner, teaching literacy classes, working in the library, trying to earn early release. Justin had had a harder time adjusting, several disciplinary infractions, time in solitary, the kind of struggles you'd expect from someone who'd never faced real consequences before. Gregory had died in federal prison 2 years ago. Heart attack. He was 70, worn down by incarceration and the complete destruction of everything he'd built. There'd been no funeral, no obituary, no public acknowledgement of his passing. The Ashford name had been so thoroughly disgraced that even his death couldn't generate sympathy. Patricia was still serving her sentence, with about a year left before her release. I wondered sometimes what she'd do when she got out, where she'd go, how she'd survive in a world that knew exactly who she was and what she'd done. But mostly, I didn't think about it. Her future wasn't my problem. My phone buzzed with a text from my boyfriend, Jake, a public defender I'd met at a legal conference 2 years ago. He understood the work I did, respected it, supported it without trying to become part of it. He had his own trauma, his own battles with the justice system from the other side, and we'd bonded over our shared commitment to making things better. "Dinner tonight," the text read. "That Italian place you love." I smiled and texted back, "Perfect. 7. It's a date. Love you. Love you too." I still marveled at how easy it was with Jake. How uncomplicated. No games, no manipulation, no feeling like I had to earn his affection or prove myself worthy of his time. He loved me because of who I was, not despite it. And I loved him the same way. We weren't rushing toward marriage or making grand proclamations about forever. We were just together, building something at a pace that felt right for both of us, enjoying each other without the pressure of expectations or timelines. It was the healthiest relationship I'd ever had. Emily knocked on my office door, poking her head in. "Got a minute?" "Always. What's up?" She came in and sat down, and I could tell from her expression that something was bothering her. "I got a call today," she said carefully, "from Patricia Ashford's lawyer." My stomach tightened. What did she want? To inform me that Patricia's being released in 6 months instead of a year. Good behavior, completed all her programs, model prisoner. And Emily paused. She wants to meet with me. When she gets out. To apologize in person. I felt a surge of protective anger. You don't have to do that. You don't owe her anything. I know, Emily said. That's what I told her lawyer. But he said Patricia isn't asking for forgiveness or reconciliation. She just wants to look me in the eye and say she's sorry. And then she'll disappear, never contact me again. What do you want to do? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral, trying not to influence her decision with my own feelings. Emily was quiet for a long moment, staring out my office window at the Philadelphia skyline. I think I want to meet her, she said finally. Not for her benefit. For mine. I want to see what she's become. I want to hear her apology and decide for myself if it means anything. I want to close that chapter completely instead of always wondering. Are you sure? I asked. Seeing her might bring everything back. The fear, the trauma, all of it. Maybe, Emily admitted. But I've done a lot of work, Becca. Therapy, EMDR, support groups, medication when I needed it. I've healed. And part of healing is facing the things that scared you and realizing they can't hurt you anymore. Patricia Ashford is just a 74-year-old woman who made terrible choices and paid for them. She's not a monster. She's not powerful. She's nothing. I reached across my desk and took Emily's hand. If you want to do this, I'll be there with you. You don't have to face her alone. Thank you, Emily said, squeezing my hand. But I think I need to do this by myself. To prove to myself that I can. That I'm not that scared 21-year-old anymore. I'm a grown woman who survived something horrific and built a life helping others survive similar things. I'm strong enough for this. You're strong enough for anything, I said, meaning it completely. 6 months later, on a cool October afternoon, Emily met Patricia Ashford at a coffee shop in Manhattan. I waited outside, close enough to come in if Emily needed me but far enough to give her privacy. They talked for 45 minutes. Through the window, I watched their body language. Patricia hunched and small, Emily sitting straight and tall. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see Patricia crying, Emily listening with an expression that might have been compassion or might have been indifference. When Emily came out, she looked peaceful. Resolved. How was it? I asked. Exactly what I needed, Emily said. She apologized. Really, genuinely apologized. Took full responsibility. Told me she'd spent every day in prison thinking about what she'd done, wishing she could take it back, understanding that she couldn't. She said I was right to fight back, right to make sure she faced consequences, and that she hoped someday I could think of her as a cautionary tale rather than a villain. How did you respond? I told her I already do, Emily said. I told her that what happened to me is part of my story, but it's not the whole story. That I've built a good life, meaningful work, real relationships. That she didn't break me. And that while I acknowledge her apology, I'm not obligated to forgive her or maintain any connection with her. I wished her well in rebuilding her life and then I left. And how do you feel? Emily smiled. Free. Completely free. She doesn't have any power over me anymore. Not even the power to haunt my memories. She's just someone who hurt me once, a long time ago, and now she's nothing. I'm done with her. Finally, truly done. We walked through Manhattan together, two sisters who'd survived something that should have destroyed them, who'd fought back and won, who'd built lives worth living. Do you ever regret it? Emily asked. Calling Dad that day? Starting the whole chain of events that destroyed the Ashfords. I thought about it, honestly. About what that phone call had cost. My marriage, years of emotional turmoil, endless legal battles, media attention, scrutiny, judgment from people who thought we'd gone too far. But I also thought about what it had given us. Justice, vindication, the satisfaction of seeing terrible people face real consequences, the foundation we'd built, the survivors we'd helped, the message we'd sent that no one is above the law. No, I said finally. I don't regret it. Because the alternative was letting them get away with it. And that would have meant teaching you, teaching myself, teaching everyone watching that powerful people can hurt you without consequences. That your pain doesn't matter if the person who caused it has enough money and influence. I couldn't live with that message. Good, Emily said. Because I don't regret it either. Yeah, it was hard. Yeah, it cost us things. But we're here, Becca. We're alive and we're thriving and we've made something meaningful out of something terrible. That's not revenge. That's transformation. That evening, I met Jake for dinner. We sat in our favorite corner booth at the Italian restaurant, sharing pasta and wine and easy conversation. Emily met with Patricia today, I told him. How did it go? He asked, always interested in my family's story, always supportive but never pushy about details. Good, I think. Emily got closure. Patricia got to apologize. Everyone moved forward. And you? Jake asked, studying my face. How are you feeling about it? Proud of Emily, I said. Amazed by her strength. And... I paused, trying to articulate something I'd been feeling for a while. Ready to stop defining myself by what the Ashfords did. Ready to be just Rebecca again, not Rebecca who survived the Ashfords or Rebecca who destroyed the Ashfords. Just Rebecca, who does good work, has people she loves, builds a life that matters. Jake raised his wine glass. To just Rebecca, who happens to be extraordinary. We clinked glasses and drank, and I felt something settle inside me. A peace I'd been chasing for years finally within reach. The Ashfords were my past. They'd always be part of my story. You can't erase that kind of trauma, that kind of battle. But they were no longer my present, and they definitely weren't my future. My future was the foundation, helping survivors find their voices and their power. It was Emily, thriving and helping others thrive. It was my parents, proud and supportive, still the best example of real family I'd ever known. It was Jake, and whatever we might build together. It was the possibility of children someday, of teaching them to be strong and kind and to fight for what's right. It was a life I'd built from the ashes of the one the Ashfords had tried to destroy. And it was beautiful. Not perfect, I still had bad days, still struggled sometimes with trust and vulnerability, still woke up occasionally from nightmares about frozen lakes and drowning. But mostly, I was happy. Genuinely, deeply happy in a way I'd never been during my marriage to Daniel, when I'd been playing a role instead of being myself. Later that night, lying in bed next to Jake, I thought about the woman I'd been at that charity gala years ago. Young and naive and so desperate to be chosen, to belong, to matter to someone impressive. I wanted to tell that woman so many things. That she already mattered, that she didn't need the Ashfords' approval, that the life she thought she wanted would have destroyed her soul piece by piece until there was nothing left of who she really was. But I also wanted to thank her. Because her choices, her mistakes, her desperate attempt to fit into a world that would never accept her, all of it had led here. To this moment. To this life. To this understanding of who I really was and what I was capable of. Sometimes you have to lose yourself completely to find yourself. Sometimes you have to watch everything burn to understand what's truly valuable. Sometimes the worst thing that ever happened to you is also the catalyst for becoming who you were always meant to be. The Ashfords had tried to break me. Instead, they'd forged me into something stronger than I'd ever been. Something unbreakable. And I'd made sure they paid for it. Every single day. That was justice. That was power. That was victory. Not revenge, though it might have looked like it from the outside. Justice. Pure, hard-earned, well-deserved justice. And it felt exactly right. 7 years after that frozen lake nearly claimed my sister's life, I stood on a stage at the National Conference on Victim Advocacy, looking out at an audience of 500 people. Lawyers, social workers, survivors, activists, all of them fighting the same fight we've been fighting since that terrible January day. Emily was supposed to give this keynote. She'd done dozens of them over the years, was comfortable with public speaking in a way I'd never been. But her daughter, my niece, beautiful 2-year-old Madison, had come down with a fever that morning, and Emily had stayed home with her. Mom duties trumped speaking engagements, even important ones. So here I was, notes in hand, heart pounding, about to tell our story to a room full of strangers. "My name is Rebecca Thornton," I began, my voice stronger than I expected. "And 7 years ago, I watched my sister nearly die because wealthy people thought her life was entertaining." The room went silent. Everyone knew our story. It had become legendary in advocacy circles, a case study in how to fight back against powerful abusers, how to use the system to hold people accountable even when they seemed untouchable. But hearing it from me, from the sister who'd made the phone call that started everything, gave it a different weight. I walked them through the events of that day. The frozen lake. The pushing. The laughing. The screaming for help that went ignored. The moment I'd called my father and said 5 words that changed everything: "Do what you have to do." I didn't know what those words would set in motion, I admitted. I just knew that my sister was dying, that the people who'd caused it were walking away without remorse, and that I needed someone with more power than I had to make things right. My father had that power, not through wealth or influence, but through determination and connections and the willingness to fight dirty when necessary. I described the FBI investigation, the media coverage, the trials, the convictions. The systematic dismantling of an empire built on cruelty and corruption. "People sometimes ask me if we went too far," I said. "If destroying the entire Ashford family was proportional to what they did. If making sure they lost everything, their money, their reputation, their freedom, was justice or revenge." I paused, making eye contact with people throughout the room. "My answer is this: they tried to kill my sister for fun. They stood there laughing while she drowned. They had every intention of walking away without consequences, secure in their belief that their wealth and status would protect them. What we did wasn't about revenge. It was about making sure that people who believe they're above the law learn they aren't. It was about sending a message that every life matters, regardless of how much money or power the person who hurt you has. It was about justice." The applause was thunderous. I waited for it to die down before continuing. "But here's what I want you to understand. The real victory wasn't the convictions or the prison sentences or the destroyed empire. The real victory was what came after. My sister, Emily Thornton, who should have died in that lake, went on to build the foundation that's helped thousands of survivors. She got married. She had a baby. She lives a full, meaningful life despite what was done to her. She transformed her trauma into purpose." I clicked to the next slide, which showed statistics from the Foundation's work. Thousands of survivors helped. Millions in medical bills paid. Dozens of prosecutions supported. Countless lives changed. "This is what happens when you refuse to be silent," I said. "When you fight back. When you demand justice even when everyone tells you it's impossible. You don't just save yourself. You save everyone who comes after you. You create ripples that spread far beyond your own story." I talked about some of the survivors we'd helped, changing names and details to protect privacy, but sharing their stories of fighting back against abusers who thought they were untouchable. A college student who reported an assault by a professor everyone loved. A woman who pressed charges against her wealthy ex-husband despite his threats. A teenager who testified against a popular athlete who'd assaulted her. All of them had been inspired by Emily's story. By our family's willingness to fight even when the odds seemed impossible. By the proof that justice was possible if you were willing to demand it. The Ashfords thought they could hurt my sister and face no consequences, I concluded. They were wrong. And every single day that Emily lives well, that our foundation helps someone else, that another survivor speaks up because they saw what we did, that's proof of how wrong they were. They didn't break us. They made us stronger. And we've used that strength to help others. Another round of applause, this time even louder. I saw people crying, people nodding, people looking at me like I'd just given them permission to fight their own battles. After the speech, I was mobbed. Survivors wanting to share their stories. Advocates asking for advice. Journalists requesting interviews. It was overwhelming and exhausting and wonderful all at once. One woman in particular caught my attention. She was young, maybe early 20s, with the haunted look I recognized from Emily in those early days after the lake. "I was assaulted by my boyfriend last year," she told me quietly when the crowd finally thinned. "He's rich. His family is connected." When I reported it, the police basically laughed at me. Said it was he said she said, that I should just move on. His lawyer sent me a letter threatening to sue me for defamation if I kept talking about it. "What's his name?" I asked, pulling out my phone. She told me. I didn't recognize it, but that didn't matter. I had resources now, connections, a network of lawyers and investigators and advocates who specialized in exactly this kind of case. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, typing out an email. "I'm connecting you with our legal advocacy team. They're going to review your case, gather evidence, and if there's a prosecutable offense, which I'm betting there is, they're going to help you file charges and see them through. They're also going to protect you from intimidation and threats. And if his family tries to sue you for speaking the truth, our lawyers will destroy them." Her eyes filled with tears. "I can't afford lawyers." "You don't have to. That's what the foundation is for. We believe you. We'll fight with you. You're not alone anymore." She hugged me so tight I could barely breathe, and I thought about how this moment, this woman getting the help she needed, this was what all of it had been for. Emily's trauma, my destroyed marriage, years of legal battles and media scrutiny and rebuilt lives. All of it led to moments like this, where someone who thought they were powerless discovered they weren't. I gave her my card, made sure she had all the contact information for our legal team, and watched her walk away looking less haunted than when she'd approached me. That evening, I FaceTimed with Emily. She was on her couch with Madison asleep on her chest, Alex making dinner in the background, domestic and beautiful and everything she'd almost lost. "I saw the video of your speech," Emily said, grinning. "You killed it." "I was terrified," I admitted. "Couldn't tell. You sounded like you'd been doing keynotes your whole life." She shifted carefully, trying not to wake the baby. "Did you tell them about the latest update?" "No, I figured you'd want to announce that yourself when you're back." The latest update was significant. A major university had approached us about launching the first academic program focused on victim advocacy, powered by our foundation. It would train lawyers, social workers, and activists in best practices for supporting survivors and prosecuting offenders. Emily would be an adjunct professor, teaching a seminar on her own case as a case study in effective advocacy. It was validation on a scale we'd never imagined. The story of what happened to Emily, what we'd done about it, would now be taught in classrooms. Future advocates would learn from our successes and our mistakes. The ripples would continue spreading. "I still can't believe it sometimes," Emily said softly, looking down at her sleeping daughter. "That I get to have this. That I'm here, alive, with a family and meaningful work and a future." There were moments in that water when I was certain I was dying, and I remember thinking about all the things I'd never get to do. And now I'm doing them. All of them. "You've earned every bit of it," I said. "We've earned it," she corrected. "You fought for me, Becca. When I couldn't fight for myself, you fought. And you haven't stopped fighting. For me, for the foundation, for every survivor who walks through our doors. You're a hero." "I'm just your sister," I said, uncomfortable with the praise. "That's all I've ever been. Your sister who loves you." "That's everything," Emily said, and her eyes were shining with tears. "That's always been everything." After we hung up, I sat in my hotel room and thought about the path that had brought me here. From that charity gala where I'd met Daniel, to the frozen lake where everything shattered, to this moment where I was speaking at national conferences and helping shape policy and making a real difference in people's lives. It wasn't the life I'd planned. The young woman who married into the Ashford family had imagined something completely different. Social events and beautiful homes and children raised in privilege, a life of comfort and status. She'd gotten none of that. Instead, she'd gotten trauma and betrayal and a front row seat to how cruel people could be. But she'd also gotten something else. Purpose. Power. The knowledge that she was stronger than she'd ever imagined, capable of surviving things that should have destroyed her, able to fight back and win. The Ashfords had tried to take everything from us. In the end, they'd given us exactly what we needed to become who we were meant to be. Not victims. Not survivors. Warriors. And we were still fighting, every single day, for everyone who came after us. The next morning, I had breakfast with Linda Vasquez, the prosecutor who'd convicted the Ashfords 7 years ago. She was now a judge, having been appointed to the bench 2 years prior. "I wanted to tell you something," she said over coffee. "The Ashford case changed how I approach prosecution. Before that, I was focused on winnable cases, on maintaining my conviction rate. But watching your family fight, watching Emily testify despite everything she'd been through, watching you refuse to back down, it reminded me why I became a prosecutor in the first place." "What do you mean?" I asked. "To fight for people who can't fight for themselves," she said. "To hold powerful people accountable. To make sure that justice isn't just for people who can afford it. Your family's case, it became a template for me. Now when someone comes forward about being hurt by someone wealthy or connected, I don't immediately start thinking about how hard it'll be to convict. I start thinking about the Thorntons, and how you proved it was possible." She pulled out a folder and slid it across the table to me. "These are 6 cases my office has prosecuted in the past 5 years, all involving wealthy or connected defendants. We won 5 out of 6. Before the Ashford trial, I would have declined to prosecute most of them. Too risky, too hard, too likely to fail. But you showed me that these cases are winnable if you're willing to fight for them. If you're willing to do the work, build the evidence, believe the victims." I looked through the folder. Each case summary showed a survivor who'd gotten justice, an abuser who'd faced consequences. Lives changed because we'd shown that it was possible. "This is why we fought so hard," I said quietly. "Not just for Emily, but for all of these people. For everyone who comes after." "I know," Linda said. "And I want you to know that your fight didn't just save your sister. It saved all of them too." I left that breakfast feeling something I hadn't felt in years: gratitude. Not for what had happened to Emily, that would always be a nightmare, a trauma, a terrible injustice. But gratitude that we'd taken that nightmare and transformed it into something meaningful. That we'd made sure Emily's suffering hadn't been for nothing. The ripples kept spreading. Over the next few years, we saw changes we'd never imagined possible. 3 states passed legislation dubbed Emily's Law, statutes specifically addressing assaults disguised as pranks or hazing, with enhanced penalties when committed by people in positions of power or privilege. The laws had teeth, real consequences for people who thought harming others was entertainment. A documentary about our case won an Emmy. A podcast about victim advocacy used our story as the cornerstone episode. Law schools added modules about the Ashford prosecution to their curricula. Survivors' rights organizations cited our case in their lobbying efforts for stronger protections and better resources. We'd become bigger than ourselves. Our story wasn't just about Emily and me and the Ashfords anymore. It was about something fundamental, about power and justice, about whether the system could work for ordinary people against extraordinary wealth, about what happens when victims refuse to be silent. I watched Emily grow into her role as the face of this movement. She was fearless now, testifying before state legislatures, appearing on national news programs, writing op-eds that challenged the status quo. The scared 21-year-old who'd gone under that ice had been replaced by a fierce advocate who terrified people in power. She was also an incredible mother. Madison was 4 years old now, bright and curious and completely unaware that her mother had once nearly died. Emily was determined to raise her daughter in a world that took assault seriously, that believed victims, that held powerful people accountable. "I'm doing this for her," Emily told me once, watching Madison play in our parents' backyard. "So that if anything ever happens to her, God forbid, she won't have to fight the way I did. The system will already be better because we made it better." Patricia was released from prison after serving her full sentence. She didn't reach out to us again after that one meeting with Emily. I heard through various channels that she was living in a small apartment in Ohio, working part-time at a library, keeping her head down. She'd legally changed her name, trying to escape the infamy of being Patricia Ashford. Daniel had rebuilt a quiet life. He worked at a non-profit that helped formerly incarcerated people reintegrate into society, fitting, given his own experience. He'd remarried, to someone who knew his whole history and loved him anyway. He'd never contacted me after that one letter, respecting my wish for a clean break. I bore him no ill will. He'd been complicit in something terrible, but he'd also been the product of a toxic family system, and he'd worked hard to become someone better. That was his journey. I was glad he was making something of his second chance, but it had nothing to do with me. Justin and Natalie were released within months of each other after serving 10 years. Justin immediately violated his parole by contacting a former business associate, trying to revive some Ashford Properties deal. He was sent back to prison for 2 years. Some people never learned. Natalie, surprisingly, seemed to have genuinely changed. She wrote a memoir about her time in prison, about unlearning the entitlement and cruelty she'd been raised with, about coming to understand the magnitude of what she'd done to Emily. The book was critically acclaimed, though Emily refused to read it. "I don't need her redemption story," Emily said when I asked if she was curious about it. "I'm glad she's changed, genuinely. But her transformation isn't something I need to witness or validate. She can be better without my participation." I understood completely. Healing wasn't about forgiving the people who hurt you. It was about building a life where they no longer had power over you. My relationship with Jake deepened and evolved. We moved in together, then got engaged, then married in a simple ceremony at the same church where Emily and Alex had wed. It was the opposite of my wedding to Daniel, small, intimate, focused on the actual commitment rather than the performance of it. Jake understood my work, my trauma, my complicated past. He never tried to fix me or convince me I should have handled things differently. He just loved me, exactly as I was, battle scars and all. "You know what I admire most about you," he told me on our wedding night, as we lay in bed in some charming bed and breakfast in Vermont. "You could have let what happened to Emily destroy you. You could have become bitter or broken or afraid. Instead, you became fierce. You took the worst thing that ever happened to your family and you weaponized it for good." "I had good examples," I said, thinking of my parents, of Emily, of all the survivors we'd worked with who transformed their pain into purpose. "You were the example," Jake said. "For a lot of people. Including me." We talked about having kids someday. Not yet. We both wanted time to just be married, to enjoy each other without the immediate pressure of parenthood. But someday. And when we did, we'd raise them the way my parents raised me, to be kind but not weak, to be generous but not gullible, to believe in people's goodness while understanding that some people are capable of terrible things. We'd teach them that family means showing up, that love means fighting for each other, that justice is worth pursuing even when it's hard. 10 years after the lake, the foundation held a major anniversary gala. 500 people attended, survivors we'd helped, donors who'd supported us, advocates who'd partnered with us, media personalities who'd amplified our message. Emily gave a speech that left everyone in tears. She talked about the girl she'd been at 21, the woman she'd become, the work we'd done together to make sure other survivors didn't have to fight alone. "The Ashfords thought they could push me into that water and walk away," she said, her voice ringing through the ballroom. "They thought I was nothing. That I didn't matter. That people like them could hurt people like me without consequences. They were wrong about all of it. I mattered. My life mattered. And when they tried to take it, my family made sure they paid for it. Not just for me, but for everyone who comes after me. That's what justice looks like." She introduced me then, calling me to the stage. I hadn't prepared anything. I'd thought this was Emily's night, but I found myself speaking from the heart. "When I called my father that day," I said, "when I said do what you have to do, I had no idea what would follow. I just knew that my sister was dying and someone needed to make it right. My father did exactly what I asked. He used every resource, every connection, every bit of power he had to make sure the people who hurt Emily faced real consequences. And in doing that, he taught me something crucial, that ordinary people have more power than they think. That you don't need to be wealthy or connected to fight back. You just need to be determined. To refuse to accept injustice. To believe that your life, your sister's life, anyone's life matters enough to fight for. I looked out at the crowd. So many faces, so many stories, so many people who'd found their own strength by witnessing ours. The Ashfords are gone, I continued. Their empire is destroyed. Their name is synonymous with cruelty and consequences. But we're still here. Emily is here. The foundation is here. And every single survivor who found the courage to speak up because they saw what we did, you're all here too. That's victory. Not revenge. Victory. The proof that they didn't win. That they couldn't win. Because we wouldn't let them. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. I stood there with Emily beside me, both of us crying, both of us overwhelmed by how far we'd come from that frozen lake. After the gala, our family gathered at my parents' house, the same house where I'd grown up, where Emily had taken her first steps, where we'd learned what family really meant. My father was in his 70s now, retired from the printing business, spending his time volunteering with the foundation and spoiling his grandchildren. My mother was the same, though her hair had gone completely white and she moved a little slower than she used to. But they were still them, still the people who taught us that family was everything, that you fought for the people you loved, that justice mattered. I'm proud of you girls, my father said, looking at Emily and me with tears in his eyes. Not just for what you survived, but for what you built. You took something terrible and made it meaningful. That's courage. We learned from the best, I said, hugging him tight. Emily's daughter, Madison, was playing with Jake's niece, both of them too young to understand the significance of this anniversary, too innocent to know about frozen lakes and near-death experiences and the lengths their families had gone to seek justice. They were growing up in a world we'd made slightly better, slightly safer. A world where Emily's law existed, where survivors had resources and support, where powerful people couldn't act with complete impunity. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was better than it had been. And we'd made it that way. Do you ever think about them? My mother asked quietly, sitting beside me on the porch while the younger generation played inside. The Ashfords. Wonder what they're doing now. Sometimes, I admitted. But not often. They don't deserve that much space in my head anymore. They're just people who hurt us once and paid for it. That's all. Good, my mother said. Because holding on to anger, holding on to hate, it would have destroyed you as surely as they tried to. I'm glad you let it go. I didn't let it go, I corrected gently. I transformed it. There's a difference. I didn't forgive them or forget what they did. I just channeled all that energy into something productive instead of letting it eat me alive. My mother nodded, understanding. That's wisdom. Hard-earned wisdom. That night, lying in bed next to Jake, I thought about the woman I'd been at that charity gala all those years ago. Young and naive and so desperate to matter to someone impressive. If I could go back and tell her anything, I'd tell her this: you already matter. You don't need the Ashfords or anyone like them to validate your worth. The approval you're seeking from them is worthless because they're worthless. Save yourself years of pain and walk away from Daniel Ashford the moment he introduces you to his family. But I'd also tell her, when it all falls apart, and it will, you'll survive it. You'll be stronger than you ever imagined possible. You'll fight back and you'll win. And you'll spend the rest of your life making sure other people have the tools to fight back too. You'll become exactly who you were meant to be. The path to get there will be brutal. You'll watch your sister nearly die. You'll have to dismantle your own life. You'll face things that should break you. But they won't break you. You're unbreakable. And on the other side of all that pain, you'll find purpose, power, peace. You'll find yourself. Jake stirred beside me, pulling me closer in his sleep. I settled into his warmth, into this life we were building, into the knowledge that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The Ashfords had tried to destroy us. Instead, They'd given us exactly what we needed to become warriors. And we'd made damn sure they regretted it. That was enough. That was everything. The fight was over. We'd won. And now we got to live. Fully. Fearlessly. Free. 15 years after the ice cracked beneath my sister's feet, I stood in the office that bore her name, the Emily Thornton Center for Victim Advocacy, and looked at the wall of faces. Hundreds of photos, each one a survivor we'd helped, each one a story of someone who'd fought back and won. The center had grown beyond anything we'd imagined. What started as a small foundation had evolved into a national organization with satellite offices in 23 states, a 24/7 crisis hotline that fielded thousands of calls annually, a legal advocacy program that had supported over 500 prosecutions, and partnerships with law enforcement agencies, hospitals, and universities across the country. We'd helped over 15,000 survivors. 15,000 people who might have stayed silent, might have let their abusers walk free, might have blamed themselves for what happened. We gave them resources, legal support, therapy referrals, and most importantly, the proof that justice was possible. Emily was now the CEO of a multimillion-dollar operation. She appeared regularly on national news programs, testified before Congress, advised politicians on legislation. She'd written a best-selling memoir about her experience and recovery. She'd become one of the most recognizable advocates in the country. She'd also raised 2 incredible kids. Madison was now 9, and her son, Robert, named after our father, was 6. Both of them knew their mother's story, age-appropriately shared, and both of them were growing up understanding that speaking truth to power wasn't optional, it was responsibility. Mom almost died because bad people thought hurting her was fun, Madison had explained to a classmate once, according to Emily. But she survived, and now she makes sure bad people go to jail. She's basically a superhero. Not far off, really. My own life had taken paths I never expected. Jake and I had 2 children, twin girls, Sophie and Grace, now 7 years old. They were wild and fearless and completely convinced they could do anything, which was exactly how I wanted to raise them. I'd stepped back from day-to-day operations at the foundation a few years ago to focus on policy work. I spent my time lobbying for stronger victim protection laws, working with legislators to draft better legislation, testifying as an expert witness in cases involving wealthy or powerful defendants. I'd become exactly what the Ashfords would have hated, someone who made it harder for people like them to get away with hurting others. Someone who'd taken her pain and weaponized it into systemic change. My parents were in their 80s now, healthy and happy, spending their retirement volunteering and playing with their grandchildren. My father had recently published a memoir of his own, Fighting for Family, A Father's Journey to Justice, which detailed everything he'd done to bring down the Ashfords. It was a bestseller. Turned out a lot of people were hungry for stories about ordinary people taking down powerful villains. The Ashfords themselves had faded into obscurity. Patricia had died 3 years ago, quietly, in that small apartment in Ohio. The obituary was brief, used her assumed name, mentioned no surviving family. She died alone, forgotten, exactly as she'd feared. Daniel lived in Oregon now, still working in criminal justice reform, still trying to atone for who he'd been. He'd sent me a card when my daughters were born, just congratulations, no request for contact or acknowledgement. I'd appreciated the boundary. Natalie had become a prison reform advocate, speaking about her own incarceration, working to improve conditions for women in the system. Her advocacy was genuine, from what I'd heard, though I'd never reached out to verify. Her journey was her own. Justin had been in and out of prison several times, parole violations, fraud charges, an assault on a girlfriend. Some people never changed, never learned, never became better. He was one of them. Gregory was long dead, buried in an unmarked grave somewhere, his name scraped from the buildings he developed, his legacy reduced to a cautionary tale in business ethics classes. The Ashford empire was completely erased. The properties had been sold, the company dissolved, the family name removed from every building, every scholarship, every charitable foundation they'd attached it to. It was like they'd never existed. Except they had existed. And they'd hurt people. And we'd made sure the world never forgot that. Emily's law had been adopted by 12 states now, with federal legislation pending. It was saving lives, deterring would-be abusers, giving survivors legal tools they'd never had before. Every time another state passed it, every time another prosecutor used it to convict someone wealthy who thought they were above consequences, I felt Emily's near-death matter a little bit more. Her suffering hadn't been meaningless. We'd made sure of that. I'd been asked to speak at law schools, advocacy conferences, survivor events more times than I could count. I said yes when I could, sharing our story, encouraging others to fight back, promising them that justice was possible even when it seemed impossible. The most common question I got, even 15 years later, was, "Do you regret it? Destroying them so completely?" My answer had evolved over the years. In the beginning, I'd said no firmly, definitively, without room for nuance. They tried to kill Emily. They deserved everything that happened to them. Now, older and slightly softer, my answer was more complicated. I don't regret ensuring they faced consequences, I'd say. I don't regret using every legal tool available to hold them accountable. I don't regret speaking the truth about what they did. But do I regret that their entire lives were destroyed? That their name is synonymous with evil? That they died alone and forgotten? I'd pause. I'm not sorry it happened. But I've stopped celebrating it. There's a difference. Because the truth was, revenge, even justified revenge, had a cost. It had consumed years of our lives. It had required us to relive the trauma over and over. It had made us hard in ways we wouldn't have been otherwise. We'd won. Definitively. Completely. The Ashfords had lost everything. But winning hadn't made Emily's scars disappear. Hadn't erased the nightmares or the PTSD or the panic attacks she still sometimes had in winter. Hadn't given me back the years I'd spent in a toxic marriage or the innocence I'd lost about how cruel people could be. Justice had been served. But it hadn't healed us. Only time and therapy and building meaningful lives had done that. Still, I wouldn't change what we did. Couldn't imagine a world where we'd stayed silent, where the Ashfords had faced no consequences, where they continued hurting people with impunity. We'd made the right choice. The hard choice. The choice that cost us something but gave us something too. The knowledge that we'd fought back, that we'd won, that we'd made the world slightly better by ensuring powerful people couldn't act with complete immunity. That had to be enough. On the 15th anniversary of the lake incident, Emily and I returned to the Adirondacks. Not to the Ashford property, that had been sold and was now a nature preserve, ironically, but to a different lake nearby. The same one we'd visited years ago, the one where we'd first talked about whether we were healing or just surviving. We were both firmly in the healing category now. We walked down to the water's edge, this time in January, winter-like when it had happened. But the lake wasn't frozen yet. Climate change had delayed the freeze, and the water was still dark and liquid and alive. I used to have nightmares about coming back here, Emily admitted, staring out at the water. About seeing a frozen lake and feeling that terror all over again. But now, it's just water. Just a place. It doesn't have power over me anymore. That's healing, I said. Yeah, she agreed. It is. We stood there in comfortable silence, two sisters who'd survived something that should have destroyed them, who'd fought back and won, who'd built lives worth living. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't called Dad? Emily asked. If you just accepted what they did and moved on. All the time, I admitted. I think about how they would have gotten away with it. How they would have done it again to someone else. How you might have died and they would have called it a tragic accident and faced no consequences. I think about how that would have destroyed me, the guilt, the helplessness, the knowledge that I could have fought back and didn't. I'm glad you did, Emily said simply. Fight back, I mean. I'm glad you didn't let them win. Me too. Though I have to admit, Emily continued, a slight smile playing on her lips, when you made that phone call, when you said do what you have to do, I don't think either of us imagined what would follow. The FBI raids, the media frenzy, the trials, the foundation, 15 years of advocacy work. All of it from 5 words. 5 words that changed everything, I said. 5 words that saved my life, Emily corrected. Because if you'd accepted what they did, if you'd stayed silent, I would have survived physically but died spiritually. The knowledge that they'd gotten away with it, that my life didn't matter enough to fight for, that would have broken me. But you fought. Dad fought. Mom fought. And you showed me that I mattered enough to destroy an empire for. She turned to face me, her eyes, still that same bright green we shared, filled with tears. I've never properly thanked you for that, she said. For calling Dad. For refusing to let them win. For fighting for me when I couldn't fight for myself. For spending 15 years making sure my suffering mattered. So thank you, Becca. Thank you for being my sister. Thank you for loving me enough to go to war. I hugged her tight, both of us crying now, both of us feeling the weight of 15 years of fighting, healing, growing, surviving. I'd do it again, I whispered. Every single part of it. I'd make that call 1,000 times over. Because you're my sister. And sisters don't let each other drown. We stayed at the lake for a few more minutes, then walked back to our rental car. We had lives to get back to, children to raise, work to do, people who needed us. But we'd needed this moment. This return to the place that had nearly broken us, to prove to ourselves that it hadn't. That we were stronger than frozen water and cruel people and near-death experiences. That we'd survived. Thrived. Won. On the drive back to the city, Emily's phone rang. It was someone from her office, a new case, a young woman who'd been assaulted by her boss, a powerful man everyone said was untouchable. I listened as Emily talked to her, offering resources, promising support, telling her that justice was possible even when it seemed impossible. Telling her about a family who'd fought back and won, about laws that could protect her, about people who would believe her and fight alongside her. Telling her that she mattered. That her life mattered. That no one was above consequences. I thought about that young woman, whoever she was, and how our story might give her courage. How 15 years ago, Emily had nearly died, and now her survival was helping someone else survive. That was legacy. That was meaning. That was everything. We'd taken the worst thing that ever happened to us and transformed it into hope for thousands of others. The Ashfords had tried to push Emily into that frozen lake and watch her disappear beneath the ice, forgotten and unmourned. Instead, they'd created warriors. Advocates. Survivors who refused to be silent. They'd tried to destroy us. Instead, we'd destroyed them. And we'd built something beautiful from the ashes. That was justice. That was power. That was victory. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Epilogue ***. If you've stayed with me through this entire story, all 15,000 words of it, thank you. Thank you for hearing what happened to us. Thank you for witnessing our pain and our fight and our victory. I hope it helps someone out there who's facing their own impossible situation, who's dealing with powerful people who think they're untouchable, who's wondering if speaking up is worth the cost. It is. I promise you, it is. It won't be easy. It will cost you things, time, energy, possibly relationships, definitely peace of mind for a while. But the alternative, staying silent, letting them win, living with the knowledge that you could have fought back and didn't, that costs more. Your life matters. Your pain matters. Your truth matters. And no one, no matter how wealthy, how connected, how powerful, is above consequences. We proved that. Thousands of survivors since then have proved it. And you can prove it too. Fight back. Speak up. Demand justice. And if you need help, if you need support, if you need someone who understands, we're here. The foundation Emily and I built, it's for you. Check the description box below for resources, for stories from other survivors, for proof that you're not alone in this fight. You're stronger than you think, braver than you know, and you deserve justice. Go get it. For Emily, for me, for yourself, for everyone who comes after you. Go get it. And don't stop fighting until you've won. Because you can win. I promise you, you can win. We did. And so can you.